Thank you very much. Welcome to the meeting of the Final Authority Scrutiny and Review Committee. We have I'm involved with authorities. We have authorities from Council Senate Club, Council Beaufort, Council Institute, who's substituted by Council Shepherd, and Council Bolter, who is substituted by Council Grant. It's the reminder about business. If you I've got to do the recording comments, sorry for those. Live stream, so we can build and record and take photographs from the meetings. Social media, but I would like to ask you to do more as well. I would collaborate. Maybe by the way, so on that live stream. Declaration of interest. Are there any declarations of interest in relation to the today? So you can make any declarations at any point during the meeting. On to public questions. We have not received any public questions. Number 4, minutes of the previous meeting. The public minutes, the minutes of the public part of the meeting have been published, and also you've also been shared the exempt minutes. Obviously, if there are any comments on the exempt minutes, we'd have to go and do exempt session. Is everyone happy that they are an accurate recording of the meeting? Do you need a vote? Show of hands. Yeah, show of hands. I wasn't there, so I can't vote. So yeah, yes. Thank you very much. I think that's approved. Thank you very much. The first substantive item is on the improvement framework. We've shared some good news on that, and the next steps. So, do we have Janice in person? Oh, yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you. So, if you'd like to say anything, give us a little sort of update on what's been happening with that, because there clearly has been quite a bit, and then I'll invite colleagues to comment and ask any follow-ups, if that's okay.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, committee. Yes, this is a paper that actually reflects what has gone to the combined authority report to the board, and this is an update on the next steps now that the authority has not had its best value notice resumed or renewed. So within the committee report, you can see on appendix, within the appendices, the letter that we've had from MHCLG confirming that the best value notice will not be renewed for the combined authority, but also within that it does set out the next steps for us, and also therefore through the expectations of CLG. So within that, one of the key paragraphs is it says that we expect CPCA to sustain its improvement journey, further embedding change and continuing to strive for stronger partnership working across all levels of the combined authority. But it does make specific mention of refining the strategic ambitions for the region and its associated delivery. So it's key there to understand not just about setting out such strategic ambitions, but also how they're intended to be delivered across the region. And therefore, it also wants to ensure that we have continuous conversations with MHCLG over the next 6 months in order to support that. But also it does talk about retaining the Independent Improvement Board, if I can get that out properly, until January. As part of the next steps, then, we have looked at that recommendation. Obviously, we will continue to liaise with MHCLG, but one of the key things was about the work of the Independent Improvement Board. So the proposal, which was approved by board, was that the Independent Improvement Board actually continue to be on the mayoral election. So in order to see through that arrangement as well, and to make sure that that is supported as much as possible, but also it changes now from an Independent Improvement Board to an Independent Advisory and Support Group. So it provides that support and liaison to the combined authority to see it through this next period, and it helps keep that impetus as well. Within that, there were new terms of reference that were set out for the combined authorities independent support and advisory group, and the key ones within there were the preparations for the new mayoral term, harnessing the opportunities for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority, including the development of the delivery plan for that shared ambition work, and then supporting the members of the Combined Authority Board to ensure that it operates in a collegiate and collaborative manner, and also about confirming the evidence of continued improvement, because one of the key things we need to do is, whilst that improvement's there's been evidence from audit reports that it is being embedded, but to make sure that it continues to be embedded and that we continue to be strong and robust, particularly around areas such as governance. So that was approved by the committee, as I say, the CA board, when it met recently. The other key steps that we're coming out of that is really down to closing down now the improvement plan itself, because we're now moving on to a more business as usual arrangement rather than that added intensity for it. And to do that, we went through all the outstanding tasks to ensure they were either completed, and any future review was to be held at directorate level. Some might be completed and there's no further action, and some may be still open, but they're open because they're probably ongoing things as well, and they're included within directorate business plans. So as I say, they will be in directorate business plans and monitored through the each of those directorates about their delivery. We also made sure that we look about any lessons that we learned from the improvement plan, and those are reflected back. And we do recognise the progress that has been made as well within the combined authority. And in fact, there was a full staff engagement event held recently, and that was part of the key items within that, which the chief executive reported on and went to outline, some of the key things that have happened over the last couple of years to do that. But then moving onwards, we just need to test that those changes have been embedded, and there's things there about like, how do we do that? Staff surveys, for instance, is one, and we've currently got a staff survey out at the moment, which we're waiting for the returns to come back on and the feedback from that. And so far that's had quite good engagement in terms of people completing the survey. So hopefully what it does say, whatever it says, will be that we know a lot of people have responded to get to that point. How we can benchmark against other organisations. It's one of the things that's quite challenging with combined authorities, because unlike local authorities where you have specific services, combined authorities are very different across the country as they've been set up under different orders. Anything about internal audit as well. Internal audit, as I say, reviewed to ensure that it was embedded, which they gave substantial assurance about only recently, but to come back to that in a few months' time and ensure that that is being kept up. And then we're talking about a corporate peer review, and that will probably be post-mayoral elections, when we understand what the position is then. And the other thing which we're looking to do is ensure things that underpin the organisation, because governance was a key part of the improvement plan, is that is continually reviewed and any policy or procedures are updated in a timely manner. So with that in mind, we've also got a full list of policy and procedures, which we have shared out to make sure we understand when they were last reviewed, when they're due for review, and how those will be undertaken. So we've got some of those mechanisms in place to do that. And with the shared ambition work, as I say, a delivery plan is also now being looked at, and how that can be reported back as part of monitoring and evaluation. So hopefully Chair and Committee gives you the update. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Yeah, that was excellent summary. Really helpful. Thank you. If you're happy to sort of receive comments and have a discussion about it, that'd be really great. Does any comments? Yeah. So Martin, Nathan.
I just wondered, now that the best value notice has been removed and you're continuing, you've got the structure in place to keep on monitoring how you're going on. Have you looked at any have you had exchanges with other interlocal authority bodies like that to see how they operate to compare? As you said, some of them differ, but I mean, for instance, have you looked at the European intercommunal bodies? The French have intercommunal that lots of European countries do. I thought there might be things to learn from how they work in a situation, working between different authorities with different responsibilities, and get some clear guidance and mandate and way forward. I just wondered whether you thought about that.
I'll be honest, I haven't looked around Europe, but we do talk to other mayoral combined authorities about how they can work through that. We're slightly different in that a lot of mayoral combined authorities work with unitary authorities, and we have a unitary districts and a county, and that is part of what makes it interesting, but can also make it challenging to ensure that we do have the right communication routes and that we're working as a collegiate way. But the reporting back to the MHCLG from the Independent Improvement Board has been recognised the significant progress that's been made across the whole of Cambridge and Peterborough, both within the combined authority and the mayor, and also the members of the constituent councils, about how their relationships have strengthened. And meetings like this are a perfect example about how that's working and the way these are attended. So some of that has gone back as the evidence to support that. But as I say, we do also liaise directly with our other combined authority counterparts. So, for instance, I have a meeting every week with the FDs of other combined authorities to understand the implications for their own authorities and how this works. So we do it through that way, and the chief execs have similar, the mayors will have their own networks, etc. So we do things through that way to look about where we can have that learning from others about what has worked. But at the end of the day, it's all about engagement and people's willingness to come to and see the bigger picture and the benefits that can be obtained. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You don't have any follow-ups, Martin? No, thank you. So Nathan, and then come to.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the update. It's really positive news. I just want to call out one thing. So you've mentioned that the new IASG will run to after the mayoral election, and the Independent Improvement Board chair's letter also agrees that it's sensible for that to run till after the mayoral election. But currently, it looks like it's only due to run until the end of May, which feels like quite a short overlap between the election and then what happens next. So is there a possible way for that to be extended if needed? Is there a chance that to be reviewed if that could be extended? Because it does feel like quite a short overlap there.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the work will probably also be pre-election, to be honest, to think about how making sure the relationships are still robust and strong as part of that. As this is an internal arrangement, because MHCLG only recommended that it go on till January, then obviously that is within the gift of the authority and the willingness of board members, it has to be said, to be able to continue that. At the moment, they have done that, and the board themselves consider that is a reasonable approach. It wasn't something that we'd said, it was one that they themselves felt was a reasonable approach. But yes, there's nothing that stops that other than practical issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dickovich, thank you.
Oh, can you hear me? Yeah, so I've got two questions. So what will the role of the Independent Advisory and Support Group be after May 2025? Because obviously there's been a lot of value of its existence over the past 2 years. Is it just going to disband, or can it evolve and be used? Is there going to be another review maybe at the end of May or so where it can be used for another purpose? And the second one, bear with me. So obviously you're going to have an ongoing relationship at an officer level with the I'm assuming with Maxwell or other. Do you plan on responding to this letter, informing the office of the measures that you've got planned for the continued improvement with respect to expectations for the CPCA to sustain its improvement journey? And that way you can also avoid future notices. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So in relation to the first one about the role of the IASG after May 25, yes, it is something that we will review in line with the previous one. I think it does depend entirely as well on the individuals, as I mentioned, that are a part of the group, but it is something that the organisation will review as we're going forward. It has been very supportive and it has been provided, as you say, that independent assurance to support the work of the combined authority, but also it also ensures that the reporting back to MHCLG has got an independent, robust element to that as well. The requirement, as I mentioned, for MHCLG to see that in place does end as of January from their letter. But again, because we're having this relationship with MHCLG to transition out of the best value notice, we can continue to report that back. It's going to be on more of an informal basis than it was previously. And I think it's fair to say that CLG are learning about how do we come out of a best value notice as much as they did to go into one, because we're one of the, thankfully one of the few across the country that have got into that, and we're also coming out at the same time. So CLG will be taking the learning from what we're doing as a combined authority, and also in areas such as Middlesbrough, for instance, that also for the same response as they came out to their best value notice. So they're learning from us about the approach and what works and what doesn't work. So I think there is an element of suck it and see, I'll be honest, as we come out of this, to be quite frank. And that's good. That's what we can do, and we can start to inform things and work with MHCLG on that to help that go forward. But as I mentioned, the role of them after May 25 will be down to how we are positioned at that point in time, and as we review it as we go along, and their own feedback as well. And that is about that leads on to the bit about the ongoing relationship with MHCLG. As I mentioned, they are looking to just have that over the next 6 months. But we do have links with MHCLG anyway. We have an individual from MHCLG that does work in tandem with the combined authority, for instance, looking now at growth plans. So we always have that link back in with the department. So I'm sure that support will be there. But I think the main thing is that we get any early warning signs quickly. So that will involve not only internal auditors, but external auditors in any of these reports, and that we don't sleepwalk into anything. So I think that's critical for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've now got a little list. So next is Councillor Hay. Anne?
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking at the close down improvement phase 3, and it says that there are some things open, outstanding actions to be contained and monitored in directorate business plans, and the progress on open activity will be contained within the directorate business plans and reported to corporate management team. I'm just a bit concerned because without knowing what those outstanding actions are, we can't give any weight as to how important they are, and we won't have any oversight into whether those actions are allowed to drift.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. The outstanding actions are listed on Appendix 3 of the report. So that sets out what items there are within culture change, continuous improvement, and the shared ambition and priorities partnership, and which director business plans they will be taken into. So there will be specific objectives with each of the director business plans, and therefore will be reported against about the achievement of those objectives. I think that the key thing is what we're trying to do is move into an organisation that moves into a business as usual approach, rather than it's something that's added. So we do have this integral to how we work as an organisation rather than a bolt-on, which is why we're trying to go through that mechanism to make sure that it's part of our everyday working and not something that's special. because that's what quality should be built in, shouldn't it, to organisations or to any process. So that's why it's within the Directorate Business Plans, and that's why we need to take it back to that as part of corporate management teams as well. So that's set out there for you. So obviously it can be returned to at any point in time if there's any reason as well to check up from a scrutiny perspective.
Thank you for that. I did wonder whether it was set out in there, but when I tried to read it earlier on, it's so small I couldn't read it.
Thank you, Councillor Bradnam.
Well, yes, thank you, Chair. And in fact, Ms. Gotts has actually mentioned a thing that I was thinking of as well, which is, okay, this all happened because the authority was found not to be working in a way that it should, and so that was why the improvement framework board was set up. But now that it's working in a better way, I appreciate there needs to be an ongoing monitoring role that's been set up under the improvement framework. But this ought to be able to turn into a lighter touch, business as usual, as you're saying. So will this whole structure still be needed? I know that there's a proposal to change the focus and change the format and perhaps change the name of the board, because what I'm concerned about is good value for money for our taxpayers. Because if this is the sort of role that would normally, okay, not in this circumstance, which has happened in the past, but now ongoing, you wouldn't expect every authority to have not only an overview and scrutiny committee keeping an eye on what it's doing, but also a sort of monitoring activity, a monitoring body overseeing how it works. And this surely ought to be done in a sort of more cost-effective way through maybe a part of an HR department. Maybe, I was just thinking, is this going to be considerably scaled down so that it's good value for money and doesn't involve so much officer time and is a more light touch approach? So perhaps you can just explain how you envisage it going ahead in future. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And that is correct. So the improvement plan budget will end. So there is nothing going forward on that except for a small amount to support the expenses of a couple of members of the Independent Advisory and Support Group. The LGA are actually supporting the political input into that through the financial support that they're providing. But outside of that, no, any additional money that was put in for the improvement plan has now ceased because it is to be absorbed within the combined authority. So you're absolutely right. So whilst we did have additional support in at the time, that's now been taken under the remit of officers to continue that and then continue to advise into the board.
Thank you very much. So I've got three more plus me, so we're not far off full house. Councillor Niche.
Thank you, Chair. I have a slightly different view to Councillor Bradman in a way, but first of all, it's good news in lots of ways for the combined authority, but it has come out. It's taken an awful long time, which is really disappointing, but that's sort of water under the bridge, and let's hope it is water under the bridge. And I really look forward to the internal feedback review, because I think that's another aspect that we need to be mindful of, is that a lot of officers have gone through some difficult times as well. I suppose my one is talk from what Councillor Bradman was saying about the IIB, the ISAG, which that it's morphed into, is that maybe as a group we might recommend that they do extend it beyond the mayoral election, or consider extending it, because I think it's possibly even quite useful. It's almost like that, not quite a peer challenge, because it's really difficult, I've imagined, to look at a peer challenge for, as you say, everyone is different, but peer challenges do look at different things. And in some ways, this has been almost like a peer challenge aspect. And so my view, Chair, would be that maybe we recommend that they do seriously consider the extension past the mayoral elections to assist if there is a change, what change there may be, but for that perspective. So
yeah, I mean, do comment, but there's probably more for us than yeah, absolutely. And I was going to come back similarly. Yes, I go. Yes. I think you've sort of made the point. It's up to you. It's up to the board. Yeah. Yes, yeah. But thank you, Councillor Shepherd.
Thank you very much. My question is another follow-on from Councillor Bradman's. You started in a very bleak place 2 years ago, and this whole infrastructure has gone in. And we're now reviewing all of this infrastructure, and clearly a load of really good work and a really good outcome has happened. But my concern is one of the problems originally, of course, was low staff morale and high staff turnover. So my question is, what's happening to staff turnover? What's happening to the ability to recruit and fill places? How is this getting into normal business practice of the people who are now working here? And do you have some indication of how much this project has cost as a project? Because what it's done is to get good working practices into normal everyday people's working practices of the people who work here. And so from that point of view, I would say if we were to extend it beyond May, that would not be a good thing. If you see what I'm saying, it needs to be in the people. And if you've got a high turnover, how will people retain that? So really the question is, how do people feel about it? You know, ordinary working people feel about this thing. Do they own it? Do they feel part of it? Is it now working? Is it there? But I would be interested to know what your estimate of the total cost for the project was as well.
Thank you. I don't have the total cost off the top of my head
no, I wouldn't expect that.
Say that at this point in time. But and there has been a lot more engagement as well with staff as part of this, because that was part of the culture change. It was culture change both within elected members and within staff. So part of that was also tested with the internal audit work. So there has been a significant change with staff. We have been successful in recruiting to vacancies within the combined authority. But to say it's easy, we share similar difficulties as I presume most local authorities do, in that certain areas and certain types of staff that you can have difficulties recruiting to. And obviously we want to make sure that we recruit the best we can that are out there to support the organisation. So I don't think we're out of kilter with anybody else. And it's not a case of nobody wants to come and work at the combined authority sort of issue. No, but I'm just saying that so that there's none of that, because for instance, a best value notice may put people off wishing to apply for certain organisations. So we're not seeing that sort of thing. We don't think we're out of kilter. We are seeing new people coming in, but as you would anticipate, we've got a lot of new people that have been here for a relatively less than, say, 2 years period of time. So it's about building that up. So it's not so much the recruitment, it's the retention side to make sure that people are there, which is why we're doing things like the staff survey. We've done quite a bit of work on health and wellbeing and employee assistance programs and all the things that most organisations would do to look about how you can ensure that staff are supported, but also then encouraged to stay. So it's not just about the salary, it's about what the whole offer is as part of that. But when we go through the staff survey, and wellbeing is a key part of the questions they're asking within the staff survey, we'll be able to measure that as well when we get back and start to feed from that and build on any changes that may be needed as a result of that.
Thank you very much. I'll just invite.
Could I just add,
yeah, go on.
Is the staff turnover now at an acceptable level?
Our turnover rates are below that to comparable organisations based on the last monitoring that we did was at the end of Q2. So yes, so they are below the median for other sector organisations.
Thank you. Just to invite Matt Cumberbatch to speak. You have to press it quite firmly, and then yeah, there you go.
Thank you. Yes. Good morning, members. Just to point out as well, the HR committee is meeting next week, next Friday, and those papers are now online, and it does contain some information, if you have the opportunity to have a look at it, at developments that are being made in terms of policies, dignity at work, family leave policy. It covers some of the employee engagement, so that does go through it in far more detail. Obviously, if there's a need on a future meeting for you to have somebody in from HR just to talk a little bit about that in the context of what you're discussing, then clearly that's something that we can look at as well. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So I've got a couple more speakers, then I'll come around. So Councillor Count.
Thank you, Chair. I've got two areas to cover. The first is very much to row in behind the comments behind Councillor John Nish. The when we get to May, there's every possibility that there'll be quite a churn in some of the people that are involved in the combined authority in the future, and they may not have the background information of what went wrong, how it went wrong, the impacts of what getting it wrong meant in terms of, money being taken away from the combined authority, being unable to be spent, and therefore it'd be very useful for the question to be put in a more formalised, in a certain briefing kind of way, giving them those 3 steps. What ended up putting the combined authority in the best value notice, what the impact of what that was, what was done to get out of it, so that the lessons don't get repeated in the future. And then a direct question: would you like to extend the independent board for a period so that we can just keep how things are? So I suggest that I agree that there should be a question put to whoever is there. The second part of mine, which is really about some of the questions of detail. There are a number of references on pages 20, 25, 26 that all cover the same theme about what happens to the ongoing work. And the ongoing work will be reviewed, it will be discussed, it will be sent over to MHCLG, but in none of those can I find who is doing what. And the problem with that for me is if it's all internal to officers, where it's either the ONS board or the Combined Authority Board in terms of receiving the information, and in terms of MHCLG, will they receive the information direct from an independent board, which is very useful because it has that direct route in, or will there be a level of interpretation by it going through an officer structure, perhaps a board structure, and then going on to MHCLG? So I think unless it's in the document somewhere, which I couldn't find, we either would like some clarification on how the member involvement is on receiving the feedback and how the MHCLG involvement is. Thank you.
So I think probably the first section was sort of more for us, but yeah, if you have any comments on that, and also on the second part, clarification on the sort of the processes around that and reporting, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Chair. And my anticipation and expectation is that the chair of the IASG will continue to do a note of that, so that is then can be fed back to the Combined Authority Board, and that will be done as part of the Chief Executive's update to ensure that that gets back to the Combined Authority Board at each of their meetings to let it know about its work, because obviously they have their own professional input as an independent one, and they will continue to monitor that, and then also make the chair will make an appropriate note of that to be fed back through the board. The bit about what went wrong and why we have that has been set out. I mean, obviously there's a lot of board reports, a lot of improvement things. There's a lot of public record about this, but what we have also produced is something that does set out what the improvement journey of the organisation has been and how that's been reflected and the evidence for that, because everything that has been done to try and ensure that we are moving out the best value notice isn't based on hearsay or officers' interpretation. It's got to be based on clear evidence, and those reports do reflect that evidence of the work that has been done in order to support us coming out the best value notice. As I said earlier, it's a learning curve both for CLG and others about people coming out of best value notices. So I'm sure if they're not satisfied as well, they will also be keen to mention that to us, and they'll be wanting to ensure that. But yes, so it's based on evidence and certainly not officer interpretation. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve, if you want to come back, then welcome to.
Yes. So on the first point, on the point about that you first addressed about how it will get back to members, so there's an expectation it will go through the chief exec to the board. It's not actually captured in the paperwork, so we'll take these comments as being the actual direction of travel. In terms of the in terms of the learning, for example, if a new mayor should arrive, I wouldn't expect the officers to say to the mayor, actually, if you want to learn about everything, here's a lot of papers that we can refer to in the past. I'd expect an encapsulated briefing area on that. So just to really condense it down. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Just before I bring people back in, I just wanted to make a quick comment myself about this continuation of the sort of improvement journey, as MHCLG called it. Obviously, you made huge progress the last 2 years in terms of resources, procedures, and culture. It's presented very well, and that's evident. as well as I mean, it's important that's embedded and becomes business as usual. There are sort of structural factors that do put pressures on this. I mean, the local ones to do with the makeup of the combined authority, but the nature of the organisation, that means we do have to be vigilant. And that's something I've always been sort of concerned about, is that when this finishes, what do we do to ensure that the improvements are maintained? You've made the point very well that in a sense all we can do now is continue it until May, and I think whatever we as a, I mean, I think there would. It clearly could be a role. I mean, my question was going to be, well, after January, what role do we have? Will there be continuous reporting back to us? I mean, that would be, I think, welcome. Probably not the same scale, but very welcome. But what really matters is what happens after May, and that's something that then we have to pick up as a committee. I think after May, without we can give some views now, but sort of a request certainly. I mean, a suggestion would be sort of at our first meeting in May, there's some sort of after the May elections, new municipal year, we have this back as an item. Obviously, that's not something we can necessarily determine now because it'll be a new committee. Yeah, so I'll come back to this. Just more definitely just a comment. Councillor Braddon and then Councillor Khan.
Chair, you've said what I was going to suggest, which is that I don't see any reason why we shouldn't, as an overview and scrutiny committee, ask for these reports that, as we've been told, and now I've lost the paper, finding it, but we've been told that the chief executive will report to the board. I'd like to see, those reports coming to overview and scrutiny as a routine, so that we can, because that's the fundamental issue of what we do. But what this all is demonstrating is the fact that we're considering this to be an exercise that needs to be monitored. And along with what I've said and what Councillor Shepherd has said, this should be embedded as normal practice. And so it shouldn't need to be as heavy duty as it might be. Obviously, in the early stages, equally with Councillor Niche, I take your point that it's necessary that we do follow the necessary monitoring phase. But my concern is that it should become an embedded behaviour. And we want to see from the staff and the HR department that all of this, well, certainly in terms of the staff happiness, that all of this is part of normal business.
Thank you. Councillor, I'll invite Councillor Khan to come in.
The point was, I wanted to make a recommendation that those papers actually come to us as routine.
Yes, I think I agree with that. I think we probably, this is something that we need to, as a committee, remember to do rather than make a sort of firm recommendation now, because it'll be the future combined authority that we're interacting with as a committee. But I'm happy to think of other ways forward. But Councillor Khan.
I'm really going to make some comments which come from my own experience. I worked for a local authority for 20 years, and I came into a local authority in 1975, so just after reorganisation. So it was the new local government finding its place, finding its roles, finding where it was going to go. In a new role, I was an ecologist in a local authority, so I didn't know wasn't quite sure what I'm going to do. Now, you're in a bit in the same situation. You're a new authority. Your roles were a bit unclear. You had to find your roles. And this is really out thinking about staff morale. The officers are going to have to find out what they're going to do. And obviously at the beginning, they're going to be a bit lost. I remember being lost in the first couple of years. So I wanted to know how you're getting officers to. One of the things that helps is having a clear defined role, what you're going to do, you're going to see what you achieved. That really builds morale. And, I've done something and see a result, you feel better. Clearly, you've had time to build that up. Now you're a bit older. You had 2 years, but during the 2 years in particular, how are you supporting your officers in defining their roles clearly? You've got sort of general policies of ambitions, but an individual officer knows where he's going. Now, in some of your constituent authorities, often the roles are quite clear. You're a planner, you have planning, you've got responsibility, you've got to get the planning applications considered. But your roles are more uncertain because you're taking, in a sense, roles off the constituent authorities and working in a combined way. So they need to have the officers working, have to find that out. How you've done that? And the comments I was making about exchanges between authorities, I think is important for your staff in particular. I found my role became greatly improved once I got into a network of colleges in local government. I saw what others were doing. I could see where I could define. It helped me find my role and my achievements. And I'm sure that the officers here, it will be particularly helpful for them in the individual roles to see what other authorities are doing. How have you introduced exchanges? Have you got at the human resources level? And this is not necessarily something that come here, but just have you introduced exchanges? Have you let them find out, your staff find out what from others how they define their role, and so that they can define theirs?
Janice, are you we're welcome to respond to Martin's particular points, but also if you want to sort of just generally sort of respond to other points that are made and wrap things up. Yeah, I think we've got no more speakers.
Thank you. In terms of defining the roles of officers, then like other organisations, we have clearly defined role profiles and job descriptions for each of the roles that we would put out for that, and officers will work within the remit of those roles and expectations. So they're clearly defined from that perspective. And it's not about taking the roles from councils. We have, as a combined authority, our responsibilities are devolved down from government. So it's the roles that we've been taking on that have been devolved from government, if you like, about the responsibility, not roles as such, but the responsibilities. And we need to define roles that are best able to support that within the combined authority, and then we define them from that perspective. Our HR assistant director is involved in HR networks across the piece. Not so much just about defining roles, but have I been there this long? Are we now gone into the night time? It's not just about defining roles, but also about how organisation work and learning from that best practice as well, what has worked and what doesn't work in organisations in order to support staff. And I do empathise with a bit about setting up a new authority, because I was the Section 151 previous to this for an authority that came after taking on and setting up a new unitary following the bankruptcy of a previous county council. So I do appreciate the challenges that the individuals go through, and the challenges that change and constantly having a microscope on you does do to people. So it is making sure that we have supported people through that, which is why it's really important that we do have the policies and procedures and that monitoring. Certainly the Matt was referring to there, going to HR committee as part of that, and that's set out within there. But all of our job descriptions are clearly laid out, and that is approved as well through the chief executive, the structures, etc., as part of his role of head of paid service.
Thank you very much. Matt, what's coming? You're good.
Thank you, Chair. I think just to add to that, I think the word embed was used, and I think that's absolutely crucial. And one of the ways in which we're doing that, particularly going to the staffing points, specific points, is as part of the process we've come through. We also have what we call these leap reviews every 6 months for staff. So they will set smart objectives in terms of where they want to get to that fit in with the overall policies and an idea about how the authority works, and then those will be reviewed. And between that, we'll have one-to-ones which can take place every month or every couple of months, and we will set those against our basic objectives and values. So there is something a little bit more tangible and quantifiable, as you say, in from an authority that obviously stands back sometimes from day-to-day services, to see exactly specifically where they've had an objective and they've met it, and that can be shown as to how that fits in within their job description.
Good. Thank you very much. A very good discussion. I think we can. I mean, if anyone wants to support a specific recommendation, but I think what we need to do is as a committee come back to this in May after the election, and make sure that we're sort of engaging in that the continuation and supporting that the improvement journey, as we now call it. Yes, Councillor Bradley.
And that is that the terms of reference are due to be reviewed. There's a quarterly proposal for meetings, but the terms of reference are due to be reviewed in February 2025. So I don't know whether the Overview and Scrutiny Committee would want to have a look at that then. rather than as late as May.
Yeah, I mean that's a good point. I mean I think it may, because it's that the question of how it carries on and us sort of engaging in that discussion was sort of is a sort of crucial strategic one. I think we can certainly look at, maybe have a discussion about what we sort of bring back and have as an item, whether it's sort of substantive enough to have as a whole item. But yeah, I think that's a good suggestion. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for your time. For answering all our questions. And yeah, well done for all the work you've been doing on the improvement plan. So our next item is the corporate performance report. So George Yenton and Daniel Buckridge, do you come and sit down? And yes. Well, so yeah, go on. And
It's just a question in ignorance, but related to the previous paper. I'm still not unclear why we can't make recommendations beyond May 2025. I appreciate there may possibly be a different mayor, but the structure and the staff, there'll still be a combined authority. We're not voting not to have a mayor, are we? So,
no,
so there's still going to be the combined authority, and I don't see why we, as an overview and scrutiny committee, can't oversee that change. The fact, obviously, a new mayor might wish to run things differently, but they're not going to not have an overview and scrutiny committee.
No, indeed, but it's whether they have. The question is not it's for the new board to determine whether there will be an ongoing the independent group, so what an advisory group. And my suggestion is, I'm very open to discussion about this, is that we talk about that then, rather than, because we will be, rather than addressing a board that doesn't yet exist. But there are other views, and also I just recognise that I did forget to do the recommendations. So we need to go back and do the recommendations. If we want to change the recommendations, we can at this point.
So what
and I think they might have a couple of. Have me come back, but we go around a little bit.
I just wanted to say that the reason I'm coming back in is that I would like to make a recommendation that if there is such a body, that the reports come to overview and scrutiny before they go to the board. So that's our purpose. We're there to improve papers going to the board. So I would like to make that recommendation on the innocent understanding that there will be something to report on. But you know, if it goes ahead in that form, then I would like to suggest that.
Okay, there's been a couple of people, and then I'll ask for some advice on this, but and how we formulate a recommendation. Councillor Hay.
If a recommendation isn't made, it doesn't get done. So
no. Councillor Hay.
I just wanted to back up what Councillor Bradman's saying. It's our job to assist the board going forward, and for them to make a decision as to whether or not such a board should carry on beyond May. I think we need input on that before it goes to the board.
Okay, I agree that the process. I'm letting this go out, but I agree entirely that we want to have some input on the decision of the board on that point. Did you want to say anything on this, or
just not to prolong it any longer? But I agree that we ought to make a recommendation. Now, whether we make it now or whether we later is really difficult from a timing perspective, because a recommendation from me would be that slightly different. Although I agree with that one as well as a secondary recommendation, is that they seriously consider utilising the IIB, the ISAG, whichever they decide to call it.
So
not for an extended length of time, but just for
So the sort of the proposed recommendation is for the board to consider maintaining the independent group, and for its reports to come back to us as well. I mean, I would guess that there's consensus on that by the sound of it, and I'll just sort of check whether that's a sort of not unreasonable recommendation on this.
Recommendation to what's
on? Yes, no, absolutely, agree. Do you have any?
I think, Chair, it's obviously you can ask to continue to see that information, and you can do it now, or you could do it as part of organising your work plan at the end of the meeting. But either way, you can make if you want to make the recommendation now, that's no problem. In terms of extending the term, it's just to whether or not you want further information to be able to make. I don't know whether or not there's other information that would help. I know there's been talk about whether or not it's needed in the cost and everything and how it was embedded. So whether or not you want to do that today, it's entirely up to you, or whether or not if you're coming back in February to look at the terms of reference and it fits in with the timetable for the board report subsequently, whether you want to do it then instead. It's sort of a matter for the committee as to whether you think you've got enough information at the moment to make that recommendation. Thanks.
We deliberately changed the timing of these meetings such that we got the papers in time that they should go before they go to the board. So I would like to make a flexible enough recommendation, bearing in mind the views of others, that it's the general principle that the ongoing monitoring, whatever form it takes, that has come out of the improvement framework, whatever form it's called, should come to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee before it goes to the board. That's my recommendation.
Yep. Sort of something along those lines. I mean, we can speculate precise wording, but it sounded like there's consensus on that point. And then there's this sort of other point about our involvement or what we recommend the board about the continuation of the work beyond May. We can say something now. I think the substantive issue will come up. Sort of what really matters is what we say and how we say it in May. But should we just stick with Councillor Bradnam's recommendation now? The work comes back to us, and then we'll come back. Yeah. Okay. Good. Thank you. Sorry for the interlude. Back over to you. I think. Yeah. Good. Yes. Jules Menu. Yes. Yes. Do send them report, and then we'll come in with some questions afterwards. Thank you. Good. Yeah, that's working.
So sorry. I'll start again. Thank you, Chair. We're bringing today the corporate performance report for the Combined Authority up to the end of Q2 24-25 financial year. We were previously scheduled to take Q1 results to Combined Authority Board this month, but we've been able to incorporate Q2 as well in order to present results to the board 13 weeks earlier than previously scheduled, and we hope that this will address some concerns around lag in reporting. I'm pleased to introduce our new Performance and Evaluation Manager, Dan Buckridge, who will highlight a few key points.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Thank you. The papers for this item include a summary report, balanced scorecards for Q1 and Q2, dashboard showing the results over time for each corporate key performance indicator, and Q1 and Q2 dashboards for our most complex programs and projects. The summary report also includes an update on headline priority activities and progress updates on the Gateway Review and the implementation of our new performance management framework. Focusing on the corporate performance indicators, of the 27 indicators, 14 have been updated with new results since the last report for Q4. Of these, the latest results are above target for 7, within 10% of the target for 3, and more than 10% off target for 4. And details of those indicators with the new results can be found in the table at section 3.1 of the summary report on page 34. Indicators are classed as owned by the Combined Authority when the ability to change the indicator lies wholly or mainly within the Combined Authority. At the end of Q2, of the 12 indicators in that group, 5 were on target or above, and 7 were off target. 4 of those indicators had a red status at the end of Q2, and details of those can be found at 4.3 of the report on pages 35 and 36. For the state of the region indicators, the ability to change the performance doesn't lie wholly within the Combined Authority. As listed in 5.3 on pages 36 and 37, 3 of the indicators had a red status at the end of Q2 as the performance was more than 10% outside the target. 2 of those have been updated since the last report, with new results showing improvements, but no change to status when assessed against the challenging targets set. Looking at the programs and projects that are classed as most complex, these are classed that way when the Combined Authority funded program or project is considered significant in terms of value, strategic fit, and when there'd be a significant impact if there was a failure to deliver. At the end of September, of the 6 current projects and programs on that list, there was a high degree of confidence in successful delivery for 3, an assessment that without action, successful delivery is in doubt, or there's some uncertainty and risk surrounding the future delivery for 2 of them, and 1 had a red status as without action, successful delivery is highly unlikely, and that's summarised at section 6.3 on page 37. The paper also includes projects there also include the business growth service project, which is now shown as complete, having successfully delivered a range of outcomes, including over 5,000 new jobs, 1,400 apprenticeships, and 1,700 additional training courses. So that's a summary of the performance report, and we're happy to take any questions on it.
Thank you. I'll open it up, but just thank you for the presentation, the report, and for taking on feedback that we've given you previously. Sorry. Any comments, Councillor Hunt?
So I've got some questions on metric 23, apprenticeships created by CPCA investment. So I'm aware that it's currently on hold given the end of the contract with GrowthWorks. But sections 3.2 and 4.3 say that further review is needed to develop the replacement KPI. When are we expecting this KPI to be available? And will the ONS committee have a chance to see the proposal that will be used before it goes ahead?
Thank you. So this one, it does need further work. I think the risk with the previous metric was it was missing apprenticeships that were being delivered for a range of other projects. So need to make sure it's more comprehensive. And obviously we can use the previous one because that contract has ended. Further work to review a range of metrics is something we need to arrange. We referred to a workshop in the paper, which we can cover not just the state of the region metrics, but also those internal metrics as well. That's to be arranged and would involve scrutiny members as well as board members.
Thank you. Councillor Hunt,
Yeah. Well, I know this is probably for development of the workshop. I want to highlight it because it's important. So the full page scorecard says that a shortfall of the previous metric is that it didn't show where these apprenticeships were taking place in the CPCA area. And analysis would be helpful in improving the provision and targeting of the service. So can we ensure that the new metric does have a geographical measure, either by tracking subtotals for district or unitary areas, or possibly Travis work areas?
Thank you. That's certainly something we'll take into consideration. Yeah.
thank you very much. Councillor Count.
Thank you, Chair. There's 2 areas of concerns I want to raise. The first one is on actually the percentage of the budget spent, which is metric number 27. It's a decreasing performance. It's gone from 89% down to 86%. Some of the reasons quoted for this year's performance are the HUG2 retrofit programme. The problem is this is marked as poor, and I totally agree with it. It's poor. And the problem is if you have poor budgeting and poor delivery, that you either miss out an impact on your residents, that they don't get what they were entitled to, what they were expecting in time, or you've actually asked residents for money for something that you don't need at that point in time. Either way, the impact is felt out there. So it's important to understand that when we see just a red mark poor, that the impact is felt at the coalface. Now, whilst this year, I'm going to come on to HUG2 in one moment. Last year, this is decreasing performance this year. Last year, it was 69%. So 31% of the budget was not spent in time. And when we read some of the reasons, the A10, the A141 and St Ives area, those are out for consultation now. So it's incredibly worrying about the slippage in those areas. But going back to the HUG2 for this year, the reason we've got behind this is it's a national picture. It's been very difficult to deliver. And then we've got some key priorities and how to go about it. And it boils down to we're speaking to other areas about what their problems are, which are the same as our problems, and therefore, what are they? It doesn't go any further. So what I would have liked to have seen is actually we've discovered that there's a commonality. For example, there aren't enough people with trademark accreditation, or there aren't enough fitters, or we can't engage with people sufficiently that they want to go ahead with this. There's nothing in actual substantial information. It's a very high level ethereal thing. We're talking to others to find out what the common causes are. So I'd have liked to have seen something more so we could add some value into discussing that. The other area I've got of concern is actually a different thing. It's in 7.2, and it's about the Tiger Bus Pass. Okay. So what we've got there is we've got a measurement of how many people have taken up the Tiger Bus Pass. There's low take up in East Cambridgeshire. It's not explained. There's a element of we want to try and drive that up. But there is very good reasons why there's low take up in certain areas over others, and that's the buses aren't there in the first place. So if you have the young people living in the Cambridge area, Cambridge City, of course they have a plethora of buses to choose from. They're all going to sign up and get a great usage from that. When you get to East Cambridgeshire and Pens, the amount of buses you have to choose from, it's very limited. And so therefore, and particularly late at night, early in the morning, particularly for them when they think, well, there are other things I could use this bus pass for that simply aren't available as an option. So there's nothing more specific there about looking at the availability of using the bus pass. But what gets me about the actual figures being presented is they're not as useful as I would like. The point of the bus pass, the point of the bus fare cap is to drive up modalship and to get people onto buses. And there's no measurement of how effective that is. So, for example, there's a discount given on the Tiger Bus Pass. If 29,000 people take that up, that's 29,000 journeys at £1 saved. But how many of those journeys would have happened in the first place? Have we spent money with no good cause? There is an anecdotal message here, but there's no message, no measurement, sorry. There's no measurement. So the important measurement we need to understand is, are we spending money wisely? Are we achieving a greater usage? Or are we just giving out bus passes for journeys that would have happened anyway? And that's what I'd like to see us focus on. Thank you.
Thank you. Jules and Daniel, do you want to comment on that at all? Or Judith? Yeah. You're on. And again, yeah, good.
Sorry, apologies. And just to introduce myself to any members that I haven't met before, I'm Judith Barker, the Exec Director of A Place and Connectivity. And Councillor, a number of the areas that you've touched on there come under my area, and you've covered a variety of different issues. And if I may just respond on those 3 points, I'll perhaps start with the Tiger Pass and work backwards, if that's okay. So regarding the Tiger Pass, we're now over 30,000 users of the card, and you're right, we have been asked by the Transport and Infrastructure Committee to look at the breakdown of where they are being supplied to, where we're getting applications from, and of course, as you say, there's a lower population, there's also fewer buses, so that is inevitable. But we are obviously very keen to make sure that if there are young people that can benefit from these schemes, we do the best that we can. Obviously, we have worked very closely, for instance, with schools, colleges and others that can help us distribute that information. One of the realities that we have, and you'll be aware that we're out to consultation on bus reform at the moment, which closes on the 20th of November. But obviously we are in a system where 88% of the buses that are run within the deregulated private sector. We're only actually supplementing and subsidising 12% of the routes. And so therefore our control over the route is very limited. So as much as we have the ambition for a much deeper and more integrated and coordinated network, unfortunately we're trying to use the Tiger Pass within the existing system. So we're very much looking at doing the best we can. Now, that point about monitoring that is really, really important. We launched the Tiger Bus Pass in the last week of May. And so we haven't yet got adequate data to be able to, because obviously at the beginning of the process we only had 5,000 users, so as I say, we've reached 30,000 now. Certainly by the beginning of 2025 we should have the type of information that you're talking about, which is which routes are they being used on, and so on, so we can actually start to see and start to look at the comparison data from the bus operators about, you know, how many people were using buses in the same period last year, how does it compare this year, and start to draw some conclusions. I'm sure we'll learn that there's more work we need to do, but that monitoring and evaluation is absolutely important. I'm really pleased to say we're working very closely with Jules and her team in terms of developing that evaluation so we can bring that rigour to that process. So in terms of the points you were making, for instance, I think there were probably examples of capital projects that you were highlighting on the A10 and the 141, and I think it's you know, very large capital investments of those types unfortunately do take a very long time to develop those business cases. But you're right, in both cases business case work has been underway for many years. The A141, we are now out with our county and district colleagues for engagement and consultation on those proposals. And that the work that was needed to be done to develop the 4 options to bring forward that business case in order to be able to consult has taken a long time, but it is very complex in order to bring forward a business case that is going to be adequate to secure funds from the Department for Transport. One of the issues we have, and this is reflected in particular, on both of these projects, but in particular on the A10, obviously what the Department for Transport expect in terms of business case development does change. So for instance, there was a very strong development during 2019-2020 over ensuring a much stronger emphasis on low carbon and sustainability, which then did require different content to some of those business cases and more work. And in the case of the A10 in particular, we are undertaking a gateway review to make sure that the proposals that were being brought forward actually match with the new stated priorities of the Department for Transport now, because ultimately we don't hold the capital to be able to deliver these schemes. We have to bid to government for those schemes, and if we start bidding for something that actually doesn't meet their priorities, we're not going to be successful. So we have to, you know, revert back, redo some work, it has to be, you know, understood, in order then to have a successful bid to government. And that's what we've had to do on both of those schemes. And actually I think the work that's happening now on those schemes reflects a lot of that. We are very aware of the importance that these infrastructure projects have and how we need to drive them forward, and certainly learning improved project management, risk management, and how we can do this effectively has to be a key part alongside those kind of issues. And we need to then look at that as well in terms of any capital delays, you know, once you're actually on site as well. So finally, in terms of Hug 2, Hug 2, as you rightly identify, is a red risk on the risk register. So I just wanted to clarify for members, because certainly since I've been at the authority, I've actually found this quite difficult myself. So CPCA is the accountable body for the Greater South East Net Zero Hub, and that runs across the whole of the South East, and it covers, I believe, 140 local authorities. We're the accountable body for that organisation, and they have a whole set of roles, one of which is to deliver Hug 2, which is the home upgrade grant, which is around retrofitting properties, on behalf of those local authorities that have opted into their delivery. Now, I have to say, confusing though it is, Cambridgeshire and Peterborough did not opt into that delivery. So we are the accountable body for a Hug 2 scheme that isn't actually being delivered in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough by the Greater South East Net Zero Hub. That is delivered in Peterborough by a consortium that's led bizarrely by Portsmouth Council, and it is run in Cambridgeshire by Cambridge City Council are the accountable body for that partnership that delivers under the Action for Energy brand in Cambridgeshire, and they deliver Hug2 in that space. So that just sort of clarifies where we're talking about in terms of Hug2 delivery. So the Greater South East Net Zero Hub is delivering that scheme across, I can't quite remember, but it's 40 to 50 local authorities across the Greater South East. That grant programme, which was obviously designed by DESNZ, the Department of Energy Security and Net Zero, and has been running for about 3 years, and nationally has had an awful lot of problems. It has had problems because of the nature of the design. There's income caps in terms of who's able to apply if you're a householder. There's property type caps, so if you're on gas, you're not able to apply. There's lots of restrictions in terms of how that's done, which has meant that if you start off by talking to 100 people under that scheme, the experience is there's only actually 10 of those 100 go forward because they're eligible. Sometimes eligible people drop out because they don't like discussing the income cap issue. They don't feel comfortable. So there's a very, very high dropout, and that across those authorities. It's also been affected by the commitment of those local authorities to supporting the hub and the resources that they've had to do that. There's been multiple issues, which I'm sure I could talk about, but I'm sure we don't want to hold up the committee's time with it. But it is absolutely the case that nationally there is a problem, and that has driven that there is now a new government scheme that is looking at replacing Hug2, and that is why we are looking incredibly carefully with our colleagues in the Greater South East Net Zero Hub about whether the learning from this process, is it actually sensible to bid for a similar pot of money again, or is it, is that something we need to take a stock take? And it was agreed at Environment and Sustainable Communities Committee a week ago on Friday that we'd actually take a stock take before we do that. So it is something we're taking really seriously. I agree, it's not a good position to be in. It is very uncomfortable, but that's where it is, and hopefully some of the complexity explained for the committee, because it is quite a challenging and unusual situation. But I hope that addresses your questions.
Thank you very much, Judith. Steve? Thank you. Councillor Divkovic. Yeah. Not quite. Yeah, there you go.
Hello? Okay, right, it's on. So I've got 2 questions, or 2 points, or 1 question and a point. Could you clarify how often metrics related to economic growth and infrastructure are updated, given their importance to regional strategy? Because is there a level of uniformity there? Are they separated? And also, I think it would be helpful, especially overview and scrutiny, to have a more granular performance breakdown of by district to identify areas needing targeted intervention. I think that would be quite helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Jules, Daniel? Yeah, you're good.
Thank you. So most of the more external metrics around the economic performance of the area are annual. That we're taking data from published data sources, and that data is published and updated on an annual basis. We are as soon as the data has been updated, we're incorporating it into the next corporate performance report for you. So every quarter you'll have the latest picture, but there's lag with some data. It's an annual figure for gross value added, for example, but it's the latest data available related to 2022. So when the 2023 data comes out, we will update that. So most of those metrics are annual, and indeed for the state of the region metrics, I think there's only 2 that aren't annual, and they're actually every 2 years, and it says 4 years, but it hasn't been updated for a while, and it isn't due for another year for the deprivation data. So we're reliant on external data for those. Having said that, we also have the state of the region report, which it isn't around performance in the same way, but sets out how the area is doing on a range of metrics around the economy, industry, and that's also featuring the latest data from perhaps a wider range of sources than has been selected for these metrics here. Did you want to go?
I was going to remember the granular.
Okay. I'll let George
just put your speak one. Yeah, thank you. It's working.
Thank you. Yeah, a really interesting point about a district breakdown. I completely get where you're coming from on that. We've been working closely with members to find the right balance for these reports in terms of level of detail. And we've taken a different approach for State of the Region, which may be useful to bring into this space. We have previously discussed the possibility of having a more interactive Power BI access to this information. So for State of the Region, as well as the report, we also have a Power BI driven dashboard, and you can the information can be represented through a map or through charts, and you can choose the level of granularity that you want to see. So I think that given your interest in that level of detail, that might be a good reason to go back to that thinking, and as part of reviewing the KPIs that we have, also how we are presenting them. I'd be interested whether that approach would work well for members here.
Do you want to come back at all?
Yeah.
No, again, do it again. Your first time. Yeah, good.
Yeah, no, definitely visual aids are always helpful, and it's always good to see it presented in that way, because obviously if we're just given statistics and data, you can't really process that as easily. So yeah, no, that would be good.
I mean, there was obviously with the in relation to the apprenticeship, that sort of district level data came up. Just to, as you say, you don't want to sort of just expand the report unnecessarily, but where there is a bit of variation, sort of flagging that, it might be a sort of an approach for certainly the sort of high level stuff that we're looking at. But just have to think about. But following on from that, yeah. Councillor Shepherd.
Thank you very much. Steve Cant asked the question that I would have asked, but he's asked it, so I'm not going to repeat that necessarily, except to absolutely endorse what he said, and to say that, I am slightly, my thing's disappeared now, thank you very much. If you look on that red figure for the underperformance of the forecast versus the budget, and it's gone down, I've got to do it from memory because I've disappeared. It was 89.23%. That's very specific, isn't it? And it's gone down to 86 point something percent. What the heck does that mean? Does anybody know what that means in terms of money, in terms of effects on the ground? Now, this isn't a criticism, please. I'm not having a go at individual people. I'm not saying, oh, you haven't achieved it. I really, really am not saying that. But what I'm saying is that the purpose of a budget isn't to hit 100%. It's not. It's not. The purpose isn't to say we had a target of 100%, but we've got 99.9. So that's really, really good, isn't it? That is not the point. The purpose of budgeting is to give a direction of travel for your strategic planning, your management actions, and the things that you deliver to real people in the country, in the county. And with that, what I really want to know is not, well, this project did this and that person did that, and we recruited 20 more people there and we delivered there and we got that, which is the nuts and bolts of it. That's not our job. It's not my job to do that. I'm more than confident that the people who are supposed to do that can do it. They're a lot better at it than I am, I'm sure. But my job is to understand the process of how we get from that red sign on there to what goes after. How does that feed back into what we do as a company, how as an organization, what we do as people and as management, and whether or not the things get actually delivered to people. That's what matters. And we asked this in the budget group, and so this has come up in the working party group, and I am concerned that there seems to be a bit of a black hole. We get a lot of information from you, Judith, about, the stuff that you gave about Hub was absolutely unbelievable, and I can totally understand that you're in this quagmire of stuff with it. I can totally understand all of that. But all that's told me is that the process of management is so difficult that the national government is going to change that. We're going to have Hub 2. Now, I have to say that doesn't reassure me. And so, and something like, for example, the Tiger Pass. Something is very straightforward was we'll spend so much money, We'll divert so many people from buses to cars to buses. We'll get youth people being able to get to things that they wouldn't otherwise have been able to get to. And the number of journeys with this, and this is how much we spent, and this is what the outcome was financially. It's not very difficult. Now, I understand that we can't do it under the current bus regime, but nearly everything you ask in these budget processes, and I've asked it many times, you get the same reply. You know, the reason why we can't do this is because of this, this, and this. When we've got that in place, it'll be a lot better. And I'm afraid that's where I feel that we've got stuck. It's not unique to this organisation or these people. I've had this every single budget meeting over Scrutiny I have ever been on, and I've been on quite a few. It's always been like that. So that's my concern. How do we get beyond that red as a scrutiny thing to try and answer the sort of questions that Steve was asking?
Some of the texts will be coming back on this in a couple of items' time, but I mean, if you want to, if you had any comments on both from the sort of monitoring point of view and the sort of delivery point of view, on that sort of big high level question, that'd be very welcome. You're good.
Good. Sorry, you just can't see it from this angle. So thank you. And I think that kind of almost closing the loop that you're talking about is really vitally important, and is certainly something that we are very focused on, and we're absolutely on a journey. And I suspect there's very few organisations that have really successfully cracked that. But I do think I can point to some examples where, you know, we are making a change. So, for instance, in terms of the Tiger Pass, you know, it was only introduced at the end of May. So the very last week of May, it went live. And so we've now got to the point where we've got 30,000 users. And in 6 months' time, we will have, by the end, 6 months from June, we will have 6 months information, and we can start to monitor and understand and learn from that. And absolutely, we've committed to bringing that forward to Transport and Infrastructure Committee, and can also bring that here, and we are collecting that data. And in fact, we are collecting that data slightly to our it is actually causing some problems, because it actually takes longer to get on a bus because of the data collection aspect than it would if we just let them go on and not monitor it. Yeah, and that's some of the learning we're doing. So we're absolutely doing that learning, and we will absolutely report that back. And it's not going to be perfect first time round, but we're doing our best to understand and then see what we can do to improve. And we need to take that forward. In terms of the Hug 2, absolutely, I would say the only reason that we are now, well, not the only reason, but a very significant reason that we are pausing and not doing what the Department of Energy Security and Net Zero have basically asked us to do, which is to put in an expression of interest and run the Warm Homes local grant, which is the replacement for Hug 2, and just go down that process. We are pausing, taking advice, looking at all of the options, and I have delegated authority to work with Bridget Smith as the chair of Environment Sustainable Communities to take her through the risk assessment that we're doing before we make a submission. And we're doing that because of the understanding that it's on red. So we're not just sort of moving forward, we're kind of breaking the loop and breaking the cycle and saying there's a period of reflection. We need to understand what we're doing, and fully, if we think that actually the same problems are going to be revisited, we need to stop and we need to look at how we go forward. So I feel like we're putting in place some of the check and challenge and commitment to monitoring and bringing that information forward. And I'm sure there's much we can do better, but I think there's a real commitment within the organisation, and particularly the work that we're doing with Jules's team to make sure that we've got quality information that we can reflect upon is part of that journey. But I really welcome that scrutiny, because I think knowing that your commitment to that understanding is there is vitally important for us as officers.
Okay. Yeah, I think Jules might want to say a word, and then you can sort of come back on both aspects. Jules. You're good.
Thank you. Also relevant to this is all of the work that we've been doing in the improvement programme. So as just heard, we are on a journey, but we have made considerable progress. So the development of the performance management framework itself was a step in the right direction for measuring much more rigorously and regularly what's important, both leading and lagging factors. We've also done considerable work to review our management of risk. So for each of the slippages that we're talking about, there will be mitigations noted in risk registers, which are accelerated to the appropriate level of scrutiny. And also, we are in the process of refreshing our monitoring and evaluation framework. So we recognise that there are some gaps that we need to address and to get better at having logic models in place and having that monitoring in place from the very start of the project life cycle. And the framework will be a really good way for us to ensure that practice is embedded and improved throughout the organisation.
Okay.
And I should just add, actually, that framework is due to come to board in March.
Thank you. Yeah. Caroline, do you want to follow up on that?
Say,
and again, yeah, good.
Just to say that I have no doubt that you're doing all sorts of fabulous stuff. I have no doubt about that, and I really hope you understand this isn't in any sense a personal criticism of what's being done. What I genuinely don't understand from what you've just said is how that loop is closed from a scrutiny perspective, from the people here who are not responsible for delivering anything. That's not our jobs. This meeting isn't about what we deliver. It's about overviewing and putting in place the sort of processes which enable other people to deliver. And what I don't understand from what you just said is how that answers that question, how it closes the loop from that red box on my screen there, which has disappeared completely now, to achieving on the ground what we want to achieve from our strategic statements and our plant management activities. That's what I don't understand.
Carol, I mean, this is something we're obviously going to talk a bit more about in the budget scrutiny group, because this is an important point and about the monitoring. It is the sort of monitoring of at a project level that we had talked a little bit about it. But I mean, if you have any further comments on this, welcome. But otherwise, we will anyway be coming back to it. Yeah. So I have Councillor Khan, and then I'll come to you, Councillor Brennan. Thank you. Councillor Khan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. About the Southeast Energy Hub, the sustainable energy measures. I'm rapporteur for the Environment Committee, and they were also raising this issue very much so. I was going to observe that it has always been a problem with delivering the home improvement and energy efficiency grants. Part of the problem, I believe, is that there's confusing objectives. There's the energy poverty you're trying to get rid of, and there's also the carbon reduction. And the two, if you try and then put both objectives together, you end up not meeting very few people that you can deliver to. And that's always been a problem, and it still is. And I would encourage you to, because it's a government funded thing, to ensure that you draw this to the attention of government, because we can't do that ourselves. We're not in a position to be able to manage it. And in a sense, saying we can't deliver this to government is one way of saying that, because they then begin to take note, because they want politically to deliver as much as possible. I'm a landlord as well, so I have a small number of houses which I have to deliver. And when I've had this problem that I've wanted to improve them, and often it doesn't meet the requirements. Either the tenant is not suitable or the house isn't suitable. Most of my houses are grade C, so they don't become eligible, for instance. So that these are other issues that you can change, maybe to improve the delivery on the carbon reduction front. So there are lots of things to make it wider ranging, and I would encourage you to get back. I'm pleased to hear that you're trying to get back to government and consider and draw their attention to the either yes or no. We can't do it if you don't change it. That's the thing that will make a change in the delivery.
Yeah, thank you.
Briefly respond to say that I'm actively speaking with Bridget Smith and with the mayor in the next 24 hours or so to conclude how we think a response back to the Secretary of State would be an appropriate way forward. So that's very actively being considered at the moment.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. I'm sorry. I'm very glad to hear what you're saying about the Hug 1 and Hug 2. I'm sorry, I'm going on about the same thing again. And how the delivery might be improved under the Warm Homes scheme. That's good. I'm glad it's being reviewed. But one of the things I think might be a problem is the way you're trying to contact the people whose homes might want to be upgraded. So I, over a decade ago, put solar panels on my roof, and am happy that I was one of the last people to get the feed-in tariff. So that was very nice and good, and it paid towards the cost of the installation. But since then, I've sort of thought, I could quite do with a battery, and maybe I need, I'm getting them checked regularly, but actually maybe I ought to be looking at improving the system and making it more integrated and putting a water heat pump in. But what happens is that out of the blue, I get hundreds of phone calls from people telling me that my original provider has gone out of business. They're wrong, he hasn't. And that I'm not getting it monitored and it's probably not working. They're wrong. I get it checked every year and it's working properly. And would I like an upgrade to the system, which I would be quite interested in. But frankly, so many more people are working from home. You can't take a call like that just out of the blue. Secondly, I don't trust them. I'm deeply suspicious of anybody who just spontaneously calls me out of the blue, apart from my residents. So I just think if we're going to do this, we need to make it clear under the new scheme who is the safe body that ordinary residents can contact. We can do work through, for example, in my district, South Cambs Magazine. These are, but we have to be careful who we're endorsing. But what we need to be sure about is for people like me, and for goodness sake, I ought to be well informed enough as anybody, who we can trust to do this work. And actually what it comes down to is the bloke down the road who my friend used and did a decent job. Now, that's private, personal endorsement is quite an important thing. And so actually, there's a piece of work that needs to be done about how are you engaging with the people who might actually want to do something to their home, but don't know who to trust.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have any comments? Hoffman, it's a good idea.
I'll respond briefly, and I just want to clarify one thing. Obviously, as I said earlier, the Cambridgeshire Partnership delivers the Hug 2 scheme in Cambridgeshire and will be making their own decisions about whether they are bidding for the Warmer Homes local grant. We're in the process of deciding whether we do bid for that. And certainly, as I understand it, the terms of it aren't very different to Hug 2. So that is one of the reasons why we're reviewing very carefully before we make that commitment. I think the point that you make around trust is absolutely vitally important. And in the meetings that I've been in regarding Hug 2, I talked about that dropout rate earlier. And absolutely, people don't know who to trust. There's lots of names. We all get scammed by it all the time, don't we? And therefore, that is a factor in particular, people not wanting to go ahead because they don't know who to trust, and that is a real issue. That is one of the things we have to think about when we're looking at a grant scheme is who are the potential applicants? How do you get the potential applicants into the hopper of potentially then having the works done? And if there's big barriers to that from the system that's being proposed, then we need to review either whether we do something else or whether we go into that scheme and can work with it and improve it. But there's obviously, in addition to that scheme, which is about, as was being said, not only about net zero, but also about fuel poverty, because you can only access it if you are below a certain income level. There is also things that we are doing separately that's more for the able to pay market. And that's sometimes about information distribution as well. So people are more informed. So I think it's absolutely right. We will continue to talk about that, but it's certainly part of the decision making we're making at the moment. And I will continue to filter that information into the Cambridgeshire partnerships as well as the hub. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Camps.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to return to the subject of budgeting for a moment. And one of the things that is missing for me from the reporting and the answers, and that's about flexibility. At the start of the year, a budget is set, quite rightly, not for Scrutiny Committee to deliver stuff, and it has an outline plan for the Chief Exec, the Mayor, to deliver what they believe is the priorities. But somewhere in that year, when things aren't quite being delivered, it is an envelope and there is flexibility involved in what they can do. Now, there are certain limits on flexibility. So you have different funding streams coming in, which are very much tied to different projects. And we've heard about the HUG2 scheme. You wouldn't be able to divert money from the HUG2 onto something else. But we've heard about other schemes which were, 31% underspent last year, which were large capital projects, A10, A141, etc. We heard about the government's change of direction. There can also be delays by strategic change of direction internally from the combined authority. But also what happens when there is a delay? So first of all, you've got to look at how this was set out in the first place. It's all right saying that these are complex projects. There could be delays, but when they're set out, they often have a 4, 5, 10-year lifespan with the officers putting in front of you, this is how long it will take to do an OBC and an SBC. We've built in some flexibility here for it, but overruns and that. So when you get to the point when that's matched up against the budget and you fail to hit it, somebody's gone wrong in the planning department. Now, there might be external factors that cause that, such as government change. There might not be, but one way or another, something has caused that to go offline. But then the mayor and the chief executive and the board have an option. Do they move money through phasing into another year, in which case it's spent, but not spent in the right year, and you make a determined decision, we need that money, we can't spend it anywhere else, into another year? Or do they say, actually, we'll bring forward another project, which isn't delayed at the moment, but it's a certain stage and we can accelerate that because we can now release the funding? And none of that is captured at the moment, where the flexibility is, what's causing these delays and how it's handled. And I think that would be useful to come to Scrutiny Committee in the future.
Yeah, so that very much feeds into the budget debate discussion that we'll be having and have been having. But I mean, in the context of this, I mean, did you want to make any comments on that, Daniel?
I think that's probably one of the limitations of one single indicator for finance in here. It doesn't give you the full picture. And it's certainly one that I think our senior leadership team would like us to review for future. There's a lot more information goes into the budget monitoring update that's going to the board next week.
Yeah, and I see Janice coming along, but I mean, there is a substantive discussion on this to have in 2 items time. But did you want to?
Yes, thank you, Chair. And it is a perennial problem with capital programmes in terms of slippage and use of the funding, which is challenged. I think one of the councillors, Councillor Shepherd, referred to earlier, is seen up and down in authorities across the country. It does need to be reprofiled on the basis that we still have to spend the money on that scheme, and that's the plan to do so, and we can't just create additional money to support that. Although that said, we do also have, and it was agreed by board last year as part of this, a programme that does have an element in there to address things where there has been optimum bias in schemes, for instance, and therefore it is an overcommitted programme. So effectively, there are already schemes in the pipeline that are able to look at about whether they can be brought in to be able to utilise the resources in year so things can be moved and can be going on with. What we do need to make sure, though, obviously, is that whatever the profiles that are in there, they are as realistic as can be, because it does impact on the financing, etc. And we do have some difficulty where things do sometimes parachute in. For instance, if we do get grant funding that comes in, it can sort of move resources into a certain way, and then we have to think about the resources and capability of the organisations to deliver it as well. So the monitoring and evaluation, the monitoring is key to that, to ensure we have the early warning of that. But we do have, as I say, the programme at the moment is overcommitted in order to support that, and we can accelerate as much as we need to reprofile the other way as well. But as I say, it is a perennial problem with the scale and complexity of some of the schemes. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Count.
Yeah, thank you, and I won't disagree with anything you've said. That's all absolutely correct. But obviously, the Q&A's concentrated on large capital schemes, and to give an example of what I'm talking about, where there's options. So the mayor charges a precept, and he's promised a number of routes will be up and running. Well, the precept was kind of based on a full year of delivery of those routes. Some of those routes aren't actually up and running, 6 months later. So therefore, there's money that is not spent on what it was originally intended for. It's a revenue stream, so it could actually, does it just shift into next year or have another option on it, that kind of thing. There is options on that, and that wasn't covered. Now, just as a final note, Chair, I can't tell you what joy it is to actually go to a meeting where somebody's underspent. I have no recollection of that in any of my history. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. So I've got a couple of people who wanted to come back in. Hopefully we can move on shortly. But Councillor Khan.
Coming back to the issue of the grants, the Warm Homes Grant Scheme, I would just comment that it is worth perhaps also pressurising is that there's very few taken up by rental properties because there's no real interest in the landlord. He's got to get no increased income from the improvements made. He may make it more lettable, and I think that's an issue where, in fact, there is tremendous need. There really is a need, and we should be targeting that. And I think you should perhaps push this onto government. I think that is a real priority area. And I would come back on this issue of underspend and the traditional thing has, as you have said, with capital schemes, but also is to transfer money to other areas. I'd only comment that when I was in local government, some of the best schemes were spent with underspend at the end of the year. And it's important in your programming to have schemes which you can deliver rapidly at the end of the year. There is always underspend in some area or other because that's the nature of the difficulty of predicting how spending will go. And often it's the more imaginative schemes which perhaps are not the first priority, but in fact, when they're delivered, are the ones which are most rewarding. So I would encourage you on that. I know that often there is a political tendency to say, oh, we shouldn't spend taxpayers' money. But my view of it, and this is my personal view, is that we've told you can spend so much money. It's up to you to deliver this with useful services. And if that needs transferring and doing something different, that's important. That's not a failure. It's that's good management. Okay.
I'm conscious that some members might need to start leaving in a bit later on. So if we keep the comments very briefly, because I do want to obviously the next item is bringing in Councillor Anna Smith, who's been waiting patiently. Yeah, thank you, Anna. Mr. Brendan.
I just wanted to note the number of apprenticeships, which is metric 23, created by Combined Authority Investment. And I notice it stops at December 2023. And the narrative, I'm not quite sure I understand the narrative. It says this is the number of apprenticeships delivered prior to the contract ceasing in December 2023. And that further review is needed to develop a replacement KPI. Now, we have a skills board, do we not, at the Combined Authority? And so I think we still do, don't we? So my concern is, well done for the increase that this does show. But I'm just hoping we are going forward, continuing to support apprenticeships because, what we hear, I've heard in local industry, the thing that most restricts what they're doing, even in high tech, is a skills shortage. Now, actually, if we can, and those businesses are very often taking on young people directly from school to train them in the way that they need to be trained. In the meantime, they're bringing in staff from abroad, and what I just think we really need to promote the skills that we need within our existing population of young people. And through the apprenticeship scheme, we should be able to do that or help with that. So I just wanted to know, is the apprenticeship scheme carrying on after? Will it carry on?
I think you referred to this earlier on. I can't remember what exactly you said. I think you said there's a new contract and you'd have to revise the KPI. But do you want to just very, very briefly? explain that, but Daniel, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, the way this was collected before was focused solely on that contract, and one of the issues with the metric there was that it didn't pick up all the activity going on within the CPCA. The CPCA isn't the sole body supporting apprenticeships across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough area, so there'll be a difference even when we do improve this metric to collect more of what we're supporting. There will be further apprenticeships done outside of our.
So can we just?
You could press it again. Thank you. Good.
Thank you. Is the combined authority still supporting apprenticeships? Yes, exactly.
Yes.
So we are doing it, but we're just not gathering the data on it at the moment.
I'm hopeful the data is being gathered. We haven't collated it together into a replacement metric for this.
Thank you very much. I think thank you very much for presenting the report. Collecting the data and presenting it in the report, and then coming here to us and answering our questions. Very kindly. Thank you very much, and see you again soon. Thank you. Good. Just there's no formal recommendations, but everyone happy? We note the monitoring report, the corporate performance report, and we'll move on. Yes. Yeah, well, so my concern is that, as I said, some people might begin to leave, and we've also got Councillor Anna Smith here for us. If anyone can hold on, you can nip out if you like, or and nip back in. Yeah, as long as I'm sure. If you do. Can we have? Okay, let's keep it to like 2.5 minutes or something.
Chair, I was told the meeting went on till 1. I have to leave at 1. I've got another
indeed.
meeting.
Yeah, that was yeah. So we'll if you have questions for Councillor Smith, then we can go for you first. But we'll do our best to get back on track in a couple of minutes. Good. We're back live. So I'm very pleased to welcome Councillor Anna Smith, Chair of the Transport Infrastructure Committee, along with Judith Varga that we've had from previously, to answer questions we might have on transport infrastructure work of the combined authority. We members of the committee did come up with some questions so that Anna and Judith would have a moment to consider them. But before, as a sort of the meeting's gone on, and I think some people might be leaving shortly, I did want to sort of offer the opportunity to ask any questions in advance, and then we'd go back to Anna and Judith to go through the questions that we have already asked. And then we can come back for supplementary questions that we might have, if that's right. So if there's any pressing questions now before people leave, if not, I will hand over to Judith and Anna to go through the question. No, I don't think there is. So okay, all yours. Floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So just by way of an introduction, obviously many of you were on the informal overview and scrutiny call that we did. I can't quite remember when it was, but 2 or 3 weeks ago probably. And there were a number of questions that you posed. So obviously, sort of starting with that list, if I can ask Councillor Anna Smith to go through those questions, and then obviously if there's any follow-up questions that the committee has, perhaps we can take it from there. Does that sound okay by way of a process? Because I think it was very helpful to have that pre-meeting and identify what you wanted to talk about. So if Councillor Smith, you want to sort of state the first question and then respond to it, I think that would be fantastic. Thank you.
No, we weren't. We certainly weren't expecting a presentation to start with. I mean, no specific time limit. But I think as long as the answers are fairly focused, and it's important topics. So yeah. So some members might have to leave shortly, but we can continue. There's no. I don't want to put a time limit on you. Thank you.
Okay. Well, might I suggest I can't see you, Chair, unfortunately, but I can see Judith. That's better. If it looks like I'm going on for too long on any question, please just kind of wave at me and
we'll do.
Try. So, because I'm not sure I can quite hear you cutting in. So if I don't respond to you, please just indicate, because I'm obviously in your hands. This is your meeting, and I want to ensure that I am giving you what you need. So there were a range of questions. I'll take them in the order that I have them in front of me here. And these are coming from, I believe, your informal briefing session. So the first question was talking about the transport programmes, really about in terms of timing and delays of those programmes, and if delays happen, what is done to address cost overruns or slippage. And I think you've suggested some examples of how we manage that. I noticed that I was listening in earlier, so I know that Janice had talked a little bit about the kind of reprofiling work. So I'll take that bit as read in terms of what happens if a project overruns. So I think there are a few things to pick up. First of all, a lot of what we're doing here is working in collaboration with other bodies. I'd want to set as a context all of this, that as lead member for transport in a strategic transport authority, I consistently have to kind of come out with the reminder that we control 12% of the buses, directly none of the trains, and most of the big strategic routes are funded by external funders. We don't have the internal funding for that. So it's always got to be done in collaboration with the Department of Transport, requiring transport regarding transport works, and that includes the Transforming Cities Fund as well. So we will always hold regular update meetings, trying to ensure that there's clear communication every day and include the key delivery partners in that. So often that's Cambridgeshire County Council and Peterborough City Council. But to give you an example, today before the meeting, Judith and I were both in a meeting with Fenland, talking about some of the specific issues in their area. So we do also, of course, talk to districts where that's a relevant conversation to be had as well. So we try to be transparent through the quarterly reporting templates to the DFT and in those associated meetings with them. Clearly, Judith can tell you more about those DFT meetings if that is appropriate. And the DFT, I understand, are very positive about the efforts that are made for us to keep them in the loop on all of these projects. So to give you a couple of examples of successfully completed projects, the Fengate project in the March area, transport study construction schemes. Now, thanks to an underspend and with the DFT's agreement, we were able to extend the funding deadlines for those, which allowed us to take on additional tasks that were able to ensure the scheme being enhanced further. So we're trying not just to kind of meet expectations, but to try and add value where we can. We all know this. We're all involved in our respective councils, but capital programmes can be subject to delay. Now, in some cases, that's where a business case has been developed and then used to try and secure funding from government, and that's not been successful or indeed resolved. So Ely Junction, we're very familiar with the business case. We know it's very well regarded, but we don't yet have the money to progress. We are clearly trying to push for that, because there are other projects. So there is, for example, funding for some work around Snellwell Loop that can't be done until the button is pushed on Ely. So sometimes there are contingencies as well. In other cases, as I think Judith was referring to earlier, with work around the A10, business cases need to be updated for new government guidance. And that's not just around change of governments. We've seen that in terms of changing guidance in the previous government through their term. And then, of course, there can be issues from weather ecology and something very close to my heart as a historian, the archaeology as well. So there are always unknowns that we have to kind of respond to. So I'll stop there on that one. I don't know if anyone has, if you want to take questions as we go along, or Judith, if you want to add anything to that.
So my suggestion, Anna, would be, but if you continue with the questions we've already asked, and then we can come back on points that you've made, if that's all right.
Absolutely, no problem at all. So the next question, sorry, just get that in front of me, is about the impact of kind of new government policies on transport and how that is having an impact on our programme. I think the first thing I'd want to say here is that there's a really, I can see a really positive shift in relationships with central government in terms of that movement to greater equality between central and local governments. We've heard a lot about devolution and partnership, and that's not just in terms of mayoral combined authorities, but that general movement. There's also, I believe now, a kind of council leaders committee which is meeting regularly as well with central government. It shows that there is a real commitment to partnership work, and I know the mayor will say that he's probably had more meetings with ministers in the last few months than he had in the previous 3 years, because there's a real willingness to engage. And I'm hearing that from other mayors. It's not simply about our experience here. I would also say I think the mission-led approach is a really, really positive thing. So for those who aren't familiar with that sense that the government is focusing on key aims which will go across departments, and there is an expectation for departments to work together in a collaborative way. And I think we're starting to see the impact of that. It's obviously a big shift for everybody, but I think that's a really positive thing moving forward. So just looking at some of the specifics around that, and excuse me, I'm kind of got two screens here, which is why I keep turning away. So clearly we need to actively engage with those government transport policies. That's really important. We need to ensure that our strategies align with national objectives as well as local needs. A lot of that is going to fit into our ongoing work on the growth plan, for example. We need to make sure that all the projects that we think are important hit all those national guidelines. So as those emerge, we are wanting to make sure that we're re-evaluating projects to fit it against that, so that we can still get the best value for our projects locally. And that's really important to me. It's really important to Nick as well. So clearly there are particular shifts around things like sustainability and connectivity, which are very important. But a lot of that already, as I have to be honest, aligns with our existing LTCP. I think we are seeing a real emphasis on decarbonisation already. Now, we're very committed to greener transport solutions, not just electric vehicles, but cycling and walking. We're looking at expanding cycling infrastructure. These are all things we've been doing already, and I know these are things close to the heart of many of our constituent authorities. But we're looking at things like pedestrian pathways, electric vehicle charging points through the Levi funds. And that's so my sense is that quite a lot of what we can see a national focus on very much aligns with those things that are important to us already. I think we're also seeing that focus on improved regional connectivity, that sense of our partnerships, that sense of working across regions. I was at a meeting on behalf of Nick of several of the mayors, day before yesterday. And what was really striking there is how there's a real awareness that we have to work across boundary and that we've all got to work together, and it cannot simply be about what we're going to do. So we need to work cross boundary across our own constituent authorities, but also from our combined authority to others and to other authorities that partner us, because people don't neatly live and travel and work within council and combined authority boundaries, and I think there's a real focus on that. So Judith, is there anything you want to add to that before I move on to the next one?
I think the microphone was off. Yeah, no, nothing to add. Thank you, Anna. Continue, thanks.
Okay, so then you've asked about the A141. So this is clearly at a really key stage at the moment, because we've got the first public engagement launched on the 16th of October, which is a really significant milestone in that project. So the A41 and St Ives improvement study is looking at the upgrading of the transport network on the A141 corridor and around Huntingdon and St Ives. Now, the study, through the improvements outlined with the study, what we're aiming to do is to support local as well as long distance travel. So the Cambridgeshire County Council have been commissioned to deliver an outline business case. We're the project sponsor. So decisions as information comes in will be made through the Transport and Infrastructure Committee. So currently we've been working very closely and very collaboratively with both Cambridgeshire County Council and Hunts District Council, trying to be as transparent as we can through the process. We're trying to make it a priority to engage with the key stakeholders. Sorry, I hate that word, but it seems it's making sure they get timely updates, making sure they get opportunities to contribute to that programme and what happens in that programme. And again, I think that's really at the heart of what we're trying to do. And we can share as part of the written answers after this a link to the updates on that that came to the previous TIC meeting. And then your next question was on the March Wisbech Rail. Now, we had our TIC meeting earlier in the week, and the Transport and Infrastructure Committee were unanimous in its continued support for pushing towards Wisbech Rail. I don't think there was any dissent on that at all. The discussion at TIC was very much focused around our response to the most recent strategic option appraisal report, which was provided by Network Rail. So we looked at that. Now, at the moment, that report suggests that the business case is not as strong as we would like, not as strong as would be needed to press the button on funding from Network Rail and other authorities at this stage. So clearly what we need to do is work on moving the dial. As members, we have all tasked officers with going away and looking at what we can do next. And some really key focuses that came through there were around not simply seeing March to Wisbech as a shuttle service, but seeing it as connected to the wider network and having a real impact on the network of our whole region. And also looking at short-term measures that can be a stopgap. So one of the things that has been suggested by our officers that we've asked them to go away and look at is whether an express bus service, for example, would be helpful in the short term, because we need to ensure that connectivity now as well as in the future. So then you asked about digital connectivity and energy and the role of AI. Now, I'm going to try to keep this to transport issues. In my professional life, I'm involved quite a lot in digital and in looking at the impact of AI on education. So I'll try not to kind of go into broader comments about AI, but to try and keep it to your specific transport questions here. Because clearly there are real potentials within our transport system to enhance efficiency, to improve safety, to provide personalization. There's all sorts of data analytic things that can be very helpful here in terms of streamlining. And of course, AI is also potentially connected quite significantly to the issues of digital connectivity, because we need to ensure that there is enough capacity in the network, and that includes in our power networks, to fund. AI is having quite an impact on energy usage, as you're probably aware, in terms of AI data centers. We do need to look at the availability of reliable energy sources. We need to consider the impacts of limited energy capacity on that. And that isn't just a problem, of course, that is limited to the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority. This is a much wider issue. But I think there are huge benefits of being able to use AI if we can get that right. So one of the things we need to do is to do our bit in working together to develop a robust energy infrastructure. And that's something that is not just about transport, that's more broad in terms of the connectivity, because if we're going to roll out good connectivity across the region and to ensure that we don't become fuel poor in other ways too, we have to balance all these options. So part of this, I know, will stray into the discussions that we'll be having in our Environment and Communities Committee. So I'm going to pause there because I don't want to kind of step on that committee's toes too much. But I did then want to talk about the issue of monitoring and evaluation, which was your last question. Now, something I know that you were discussing earlier in the meeting. I wanted to just start off by saying that one of my roles, clearly as chair of the TIC, is to be that voice of scrutiny as part of that scrutiny process. So to help to work with our committee members and our broader membership to hold the officers to account, and to do that on behalf of Mayor Nick as well. I have to say, I think our officers do an absolutely astounding job, and I can't speak highly enough of them, but Judith, I think, will probably attest to the fact that both I and the rest of the committee do seek to really push our officers hard on all the issues within our committee. And this development of monitoring and evaluation is a really key part of that for us. And this is something that we are mentioning in most of our meetings, and I know this is something that officers are working on, because we want to see exactly what you were talking earlier, which is about, can we really effectively measure the impact of what we're doing, and how do we develop metrics that allow us to do that effectively. So a few things that are underway that hopefully will help that happen, and some of these are transport based and some of these are combined authority based. I don't know if Jules is still in the room, but otherwise, but some of these will go into that wider area. So there's enhanced resource allocation. So we've successfully recruited and onboarding additional specialist performance managers at management and evaluation resources, and that's within the Chief Executive's office. We're working on new evidence bases. I think there were discussions around the State of the Region report, for example, earlier, because any measuring of impact is only as good as the information that's going into that. And what I'm particularly pleased to see on things like the State of the Region report is that those things will be dynamic and ongoing. So it won't simply be a snapshot on time, and we will see development as that goes through. The monitoring evaluation framework is being refreshed to align with the single assurance framework, and I understand there's a plan to present this for CA board approval in March. We are also within the transport team reviewing the LTCP, the Local Transport and Connectivity Plan, monitoring and evaluation plan. Officers are hoping to present their findings and recommendations to the January Transport and Infrastructure Committee. I know that's something that as chair I'm particularly interested in hearing more about. There's also a thorough review of the monitoring and evaluation of the Transforming Cities Fund happening at the moment to look at those schemes. There will be a link to the SAF implementation process here. And obviously we're looking at the moment to think about how we can focus on that business case integration. So whether that's at the outline or at the full stage, there's now a proposed programme for monitoring and evaluation within business case work. So that will link with that refreshed monitoring evaluation framework. So we can do a forward-looking programme of works for that 1 and 5 year post-scheme reviews. That's something that's really important. We also need to talk more with our partner highways authorities about data sharing and coordination of monitoring efforts. And we've begun discussions with our highways authority partners in that. And finally, the policy insight and performance team is working with the public transport team in developing an evaluation plan for the new and improved bus routes that have been funded through the additional precept investment. I know that you've also asked to talk about bus reform. I'm going to be really, really careful what I say here because we are in the consultation period. I don't in any way wish to predetermine anything, and I can see our monitoring officer sitting in the room. And I know, I suspect he will want me to be very cautious here too. But just to say that consultation is now well past the halfway stage. It is due to conclude on November the 20th, 2024. Clearly, anything that we can all do in our constituent authorities to promote the take-up of that would be very, very helpful, because in order to inform the Mayor's decision, the more responses, the better. And there has been significant engagement in the region with statutory consultees, protected characteristic groups, and drop-in sessions. There is more information on that we can talk to if that would be helpful. Now, I think that's at the end of my list of questions, and I really appreciate that you were able to share those in advance. Really, really happy to open that out, Chair, if there's time, and appreciate you are pressed for time.
Thank you very much. Yeah, do really appreciate that. Your time. We do definitely have some follow-ups. I just wanted to sort of make a procedural point. We'll be coming forward, but all that really means is that we won't be able to make any decisions. I mean, recommendations. I think the substantive decision-making stuff we've already done in terms of the recommendations before. But I think we can carry on with the discussion, which is not a sort of decision-making point. But yeah. So definitely, I've got a couple of hands up so far. Councillor Bradnam, Councillor Niche, and so Councillor Bradnam to start with. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. So thank you, Anna, for your report and your answering of all that range of questions. Can I just ask, is the obviously there are certain areas in our region, I'm talking about the digital connectivity and infrastructure. Is our programme of improvement being delivered through the City Fibre scheme in any way, or is that a separate? I know that's received government funding, the City Fibre rollout, but is that a separate issue, or is that part of our programme? I'm asking this for a particular reason.
I think I know the answer to that, but it might be better that I just defer that to Judith to make sure I'm not being inaccurate.
Yes.
So the work that we do on digital connectivity is through Connecting Cambridgeshire, and Connective Cambridgeshire has a number of strands of work, some of which is around is digital inclusion, is about enabling people to use the connectivity they've got. Others, as you suggest, it's about actually making sure that broadband reaches 100%, whereas I think at the moment we're at 86%. And so that kind of final 14%. And City Fibre are one of the organisations that are doing that rollout. So that they are part. I don't know the details of, how much and where, but they are one of the organisations that are involved in that process.
Okay, so thank you very much.
Chair, if I may add, I don't know if it is partly behind your question, Councillor Bradnam, but there is often an assumption that City Fibre is a fully state-run, council-run organisation. It isn't.
No.
It's I believe, a private company.
Yes, exactly.
So it's a partner company, but it's not a subsidiary.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. The reason I asked that question is because I would like us to be very clear as a commissioning authority to bodies like City Fibre, who, as you've said, Councillor Smith, is a private company, that they are following the proper procedure for consultation. I will just mention this one aspect. In my ward of Waterbeach, City Fibre have seen fit to, without any warning, installing a communications hub. That in itself is not necessarily a problem, but they have installed it right on the village green. Now, this is a registered village green. This is a location recognised in law as being protected. They did not contact the parish council. They did not have any consultation about the installation. And because it's a hub, it's actually a really big box plus an underground joint box and connections, with obviously a view to improving the broadband in Waterbeach, which is sorely needed. But they didn't do any consultation with the parish council first. We were all absolutely horrified. First we knew of it was a huge white box in the middle of the village green. And I've undertaken site visits, explained 7 other possible alternative locations we suggested. We gave them also the information from the GCP about other infrastructure projects that are going through, so that they shouldn't jeopardise those by inadvertently putting it somewhere else. But I have had no indication from them that they are prepared to move it. They've offered compensation, but no money, if the parish council undertake to leave it where it is. But actually, point is, they have chosen the site because it's right in the middle of the village, but it's right in the middle of the village because it's in a protected area. I just think we should have some responsibility as a combined authority for what our contractors are doing. And I would like to know how I can take that up, Judith, with you maybe directly, because I am not getting much traction from City Fibre or indeed their subcontractors.
Councillor Brenner, is it clearly a CPTA project, under Connecting Cambridgeshire?
Well, that's why I asked the question to begin with.
Yes. You're on.
What I'm not entirely sure on is whether they are our contractors through Connecting Cambridgeshire, or whether indeed we are, encouraging them to operate in particular areas to improve digital connectivity. So, and obviously for this particular scheme, I particularly don't know where this particular scheme fits in that place. So what I can do is obviously raise this with the digital connectivity team. And in fact, I'm meeting with Frank Jordan tomorrow, who oversees that at county. So I can bring it up with him so that we get a route in order that you can speak to the people that you need to. So I'll take that away as an action.
I will email you with the detail, Judith, if that's helpful.
Thank you. Councillor
Chair, if I may interject, I think something, this is one of the real complexities, isn't it, of our local government system? And I think you make a really important point, which is, let's try to isolate whether in this particular instance they're acting as a contractor of the CPCA project, or whether this is a completely separate project. That's a question that comes up a lot in a lot of transport issues, is this something of which we have our convening power, where we are able to exercise the moral authority of saying we are very concerned to hear about this and we wish to, push you to do better, or whether it's something that we are directly responsible for through contracting or subsidy. So I think you raise a really important point there, Councillor Bradnam, and Judith, if you could keep me informed of the outcome of that, I'd be very grateful.
Thank you. Councillor Niche.
Thank you, Chair. Mine's back onto the 141, and the concern from my perspective, and I think a bit of the committee as well, is the slippage that it's had. I mean, specifically, if I go back that it started probably 6 years ago, I might be slightly wrong on the time frame, and we were very close to having a strategic outline business case probably about 4 years ago, that we're still back in consultation. There are issues about the scheme, which obviously I clearly won't go into because it's in consultation phase at the moment, and I don't want to preempt that. But there are concerns as to why, from a committee's perspective, it's been allowed to slip. I know there's been changes in legislation a little bit, but I just wonder your view from a committee's perspective as why it's not been followed up and why it's been taking such a long time to get even to the consultation stage.
Thank you. Shall I kick that off? So absolutely to reassure you, the committee we have been consistently asking questions around this project and calling updates in and making sure that we are pushing as hard as we can for the work to happen as quickly as it can. That's also happening from your Hunts rep specifically, who is absolutely tenacious on this. So I can absolutely reassure you of that as well. Judith, are you well versed in the history of this one? Because back 6 years, of course, is significantly before my time. And I don't know if you're able to give a little bit of I appreciate it's before yours as well.
I'm not particularly well cited on the detail of what's happened up until this point, but I would absolutely, I'm happy to sort of reflect on that and make sure that lessons are learned from that process. I think what we're very focused on is progressing it now. Now, obviously, the work that's happening now is to create a business case, which can then form part of a request to government for the funding, because it is a very significant capital investment, and we don't hold that capital. So we have to now ensure that we pull together the options that are currently being consulted on, what is the outcome from that, to inform a full business case that can then go to government. And I think in parallel to that, we're very much looking at how that scheme forms part of our thinking for the local growth plan that the authority will need to submit with our partners into government next sort of spring, summertime, because it is that sort of how this scheme fits with that local growth ambition to support those sectors and address what's emerging through that we anticipate that we were likely to get a funding settlement. So ensuring that this project is within that to seek funding from DFT or other government departments will be critical. But I apologise, I don't have the detail because I only started at the authority in January.
And I can add a little more, which is there is a very, very helpful. So the committee asked in the most recent paper for there to be an update on the context to the delays. And we can certainly ensure that a link is recirculated to the paper. You'll find that section 3 on that paper, this is the tick paper, is really very helpful on what we've had as a committee and talking through some of the processes. So, for example, I know that back in 2021, we had the two projects that were merged, but there have also been kind of reassessments and other delays since then. It's probably helpful if there's a request for further information on top of that paper. It's probably useful to ask Judith to take that away and talk to County, who are the delivery agency there, because they will also have some of that granular detail that they're able to bring in that picture. But I'd be also very happy to bring any questions that this committee may have up myself in my discussions.
Thank you. Councillor Nish.
Just briefly, thank you for that. My knowledge does go a bit further back, unfortunately. Having sat on it since 2018 or 2019, I can't remember now because the time flies. And it's just a comment really, is that it just seems to get to a stage and then dropped off the system, and without badgering it, then just come back on the system. And you quite rightly said it was then merged, and the merger seems, and I say, I'll be mindful there's a consultation going on, in that the St Ives part of it seems to have dropped out. But that's just a general comment and shouldn't be taken from a consultation perspective.
Thank you. Yep, you're very welcome not to comment on that in light of the advice. Councillor Diffwich, thank you.
Oh, is it on? Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you for both of your responses to all the questions. Councillor Smith, I know you said that we don't control the network or most of the buses. Are you able to just clarify which we do have control over, or possibly give a percentage so that people can have a clearer idea of what we do have control over?
So I'm able to start with that, and I will look to Matt, who I can see on the screen, to wave at me if I start to stray too far into any of the consultation areas here. I will try not to. So as it stands, we don't directly control any rail service. We obviously have partnership discussions, but we're not in direct control of any of that. We control roughly 12% of our bus network, and those are the ones that we subsidise directly. I do actually have a list of all the buses we subsidise directly, but I won't propose to read all those out to you now. But it is round about 12% of the network. So the rest of the network is run commercially. It is not something that we don't strategically set the routes. We don't strategically ask for the overall shape of that network. That's not something we're able to do in the current setup. So as it stands, if you want to set up a commercial route, your discussion is basically directly with the traffic commissioner. So clearly, we do everything we can to influence, to suggest, to lobby, and there are very frequent meetings with all of our partner bus companies to work with them and to build those relationships, but it is not something that we have direct control over. And I probably ought to stop there because I suspect I'm on kind of thin ground towards any kind of predetermination.
Yeah. Thank you. Did you have any follow-ups?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. Councillor Hunt.
Thank you. Bring us back to April 141. It's going to look like myself and Councillor Niche are doing a double act here. But on the current consultation, there's about 20 days left. And I'm aware that there's been a big push to raise awareness of the consultation. So I know that the working group that myself and Councillor Niche are on at County Council have spoken about what was going to be done. And there's been leaflet drops and there's been in-person sessions, which have been great. The question is, now that we're in this final phase of the consultation being open, what can the CPCA do to raise awareness as it reaches a tail end?
Okay, sorry, just calling. For some reason, all my computer notes all went down at once there, so excuse me for the sudden look of surprise on my face. I think all of us need to ensure that we are consistently pushing this, and I know that that Hunts have been pushing this extremely hard in terms of trying to get people to take part in the consultation. I think that's incredibly important, and I think we all need to keep doing that. Judith, I'm sure that there is comms planned to do that final push for the last part of this consultation, both from us as well as from our partner authorities. And I don't know if you're able to give us any more details of what the specifics of that comms plan, because I know some are in place.
Not able to give specifics of what the final push is, but absolutely on all of the consultation processes that we're running at the moment, because obviously there's a number that we're either participating in or running, we're absolutely kind of taking that sort of final push position. There is an online webinar this evening which gives people an opportunity to find out more, and I can certainly, and I will do that shortly, just chase up with our head of communications that he is speaking with county colleagues just to make sure that is exactly what happens. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I don't think we have any more follow-up questions. We covered a lot there, and as far as you could, you did respond to our questions on including on current matters. Really grateful to you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Chair. I really do apologise for not being able to be there in person. I hope that you'll ask me again and I can come and speak to you in person, because I know it's a lot easier when we're all in the same room.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, thank you. Right. So we move on to the budget scrutiny working group feedback. Unfortunately, Councillor Shepherd, who was on the group, has gone. But Councillor Tunis is still sticking it out. Thank you very much indeed. Just a very brief sort of introduction is just by introductory remarks is to note how good it is to have had substantive sight of the budget at this early stage, and that has enabled some really useful discussions and enabled the working group to really to get into this and the work that they've done as we can see the report and we'll discuss now has been really productive and constructive. I don't know whether Janice and Rob, you want to say anything in advance, or sort of start off with, or start off with Councillor Tunis, as you wish. Really, it's.
Thank you, Chair. No, it's just say it was a thank you for the opportunity to work with the working group on that. They did ask some very challenging questions, which is appropriate to do so, and made us look again at a number of things. Just to say that we have recognised it was informal and this meeting would actually be able to provide the formal feedback, but we have noted that within the report on the MTFP to the board to ensure that the feedback that is in relation to the MTFP is fed back within the paper and responded to as well within that paper, just to make sure it is timely, because the board papers did go yesterday. Tuesday.
Yeah.
Tuesday I went out for publication, so just make sure that that was absolutely referenced and was fed back to the board, and we also fed back in sessions with the leaders as well to ensure that what we knew at the time was part of the thinking. Thank you, Chair.
Appreciate it. Yeah, so now I'd like to ask if Roger, Councillor Juniors want to make any comments on the work that he's done.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to echo my colleague, Councillor Shepherd's thanks. We have come to this fairly new, and there is a vast amount of information and dialogue to have. What I can say is Anne facilitated meetings with us in 3 different groups, place and connectivity, corporate core and economy and growth. We had wonderful engagement with each. The reception was very warm, and every question that we asked was provided with some form of answer and a follow-up. In fact, we had a number of follow-up meetings as well. So if I was to look at this overall, I feel that the improvement programme and the culture here within the Combined Authority is actually second to none. I've been involved in a lot of local authorities when challenging questions can be asked, and you don't often get as receptive and as accommodating officers and responses that we receive. So I have to say, very well done. Over and above that, going back and echoing what Councillor Nisha said as well, we're going through a change management process, which is also cultural as well. And we covered this in the staff morale, etc., within our observations and recommendations. What I would say was, we'd echo Councillor Nisha's remarks that the current improvement programme is working well, and that team, and I would endorse his recommendation that would stay in place. If it ain't broke, don't fix it type thing, until such time as that continuous improvement process, and I think as you mentioned, is embedded. And then once it's embedded, we can sort of come away from that. And so looking at one of the reports analysis here, we would like to see basically a dashboard report on that mechanism for handing over. So that would be probably a gateway type report to say the improvement programme has recommended X, Y, and Z. Those have now been achieved. They're now embedded. That's now come off the programme. So Chair, what you were recommending to come back in May with, if we could see something like that as a dashboard report, that then we could discuss as to be the reporting mechanism, that would be wonderful. Because what I wouldn't want to see is the process being ended too early before all of that embedded continuous improvement and culture. And I'll go back to that, actually. It's a cultural thing, and it's much more than the technical side. Something else, which again, from the earlier debates, and I'm just going to come very quickly through the report in a moment. In terms of feedback, we are looking at the moment internally. So again, this is all staff and officers and members. What I haven't heard very much about is actually feedback from the outcomes of what we do here, which is the residents and the businesses. And I think in terms of the reporting that we see, we would like to see that come through as well, because it is all about the outcomes, the money we spend and the changes we make. And while we may say we're doing very, very well, that perception needs to be seen as well. So I think that would be a really useful metric, and how we do that, I know, is another complex area. So going to the report itself very quickly, it's on page 87, and just to give some context, there are 8 items and they all rank number 3 in importance. So we seem to have a huge number there in 24. So it's a big responsibility to take on. We put our recommendations into page 91, and I'll very quickly skim through these just to give the committee a flavour. But we did say very well done. This is a huge achievement to get the lifting of the notice, and so that's number one. Clarification: we've got 50%. The key concern was 50% of the capital programme at the moment. We seem to be spending about 50%. And looking at the forward plan as well, we've got about 152 million forecast spend, hoping to hit 125. We've spent 38 to date, which means we've got to spend 87 between now and the end of the year, which is 3 times what we spent in the first 6 months. So again, levels of confidence from the budget working group. Please, if that is not going to be achievable, I think it's better to let us know sooner rather than later. And again, we touched on contingency projects as well, and particularly those time-sensitive projects. Those would be the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. I think that ends, is it April next year? 38 projects. So my understanding, if that money isn't spent, then that's that. So what we would like to see is, a clear, precise KPI, confidence that that money will be spent. And if they are reprofiled, much as we mentioned earlier, there are contingency projects there, or those that are not critical, we understand how they'll fall forward. Following on from that, again, we'll go back to outcomes. If we are not going to spend, and at the moment we're going to be shortfall something in the order, I think, of about 25, what are we not going to deliver this year? What are the outcomes that are not going to be delivered, so that we can be clear with the residents, businesses, and as a PR approach? Again, that's just a general observation. Moving forward, continuous improvement and knowledge management, we mentioned that as a key, but that also comes together with staff morale and retention. So you mentioned metrics that you bring forward on that. That'd be fantastic to see that. I think, again, I go back to what I see and feel in engaging, and it is very positive. And I hope the residents and the businesses that engage with us also see that. It'd be good to get that feedback too. I could go on, which I normally do, but I will try to keep it short. It's exceptional reporting. There's a great amount of data in here, and everyone I speak to says this is significantly better. It's a lot to digest, and I think going back to exceptional reporting is got to be the key, where there are key decisions to be made that are highlighted, so we don't have to plow through perhaps the huge amount of information. It's still necessary. So I will end it there, but I would thank you, Chair, for that opportunity. Yeah. And again, just to echo, I think as a culture, it is a good place to be, I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for your presentation, and obviously for the work that went into the report. If you have any further comments on what Councillor Junior said, otherwise I can open up.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for those comments. Absolutely about the levels of confidence in delivery, and you mentioned about the yet to spend, and indeed as part of the NTFP, as part of the monitoring report that is going to board, it does reference that particular issue and about that risk currently, and we have reprofiled as an organisation £23 million into future years because of the risk of delivery. But you're right, I think still in the second half of the year it still looks high, and the report does note that this is still needed to be looked at in more detail about how realistic that is as part of delivery. So that's absolutely spot on, thank you, and we have referenced that as part of the monitoring report. The contingency and being time sensitive, yes, UK Shared Prosperity Fund is one that is time sensitive to that, but I think there is an extension to that is being proposed. Do you want to talk to that?
So in the budget announced by the government, they've extended a further year of the UK SPF Shared Prosperity Fund for next financial year. However, they have more recently clarified that there's still the need to spend the current allocation by the end of March next year. We can't roll it forward. So there is still that, what's often called the cliff edge on the current programme, before we can then talk, well, At the same time, we'll be working out what we do with the new money when we're told how much of it we're getting.
Yeah, thank you. Does anyone have any comments or questions on the budget? No? See, good. I mean, so we can't sort of make recommendations, but obviously you've clearly talked about at the beginning about how you're sort of bringing the output of this to the board and which is really helpful. So I don't think there's anything sort of decision making wise we need to do. But good, thank you.
To say, Chair, just to reassure you that when presenting the paper at board, I will advise as well about the recommendations, and they've been formally agreed at this meeting.
Yeah,
thank you.
Good, thank you very much. Thank you. Excellent, and thank you for staying for the whole meeting. Thank you. So now that they're the sort of like the standard of items, we can now run through the forward plan and then have a quick look at the work programme. The we have the forward plan here. When I last looked at it, I didn't have any particular comments on the forward plan to integrate that we needed to. If anyone else has any? Yes, Anna, Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know if you want to. I was caught out by the fact that I am actually a rapporteur on the highways, the Transport and Infrastructure Committee, but I did manage to watch it online, and I do have a report if you'd like to.
Yes, so I was going to sort of cover that on in the sort of the work program. Oh no, it's in the. Oh, it's in full plan. Apologise, I was getting myself mixed up. Yes, you're quite right, Councillor Bradnam. So we now no comments on the full plan itself, but this would be a good opportunity, and I've got one myself, to provide any verbal updates on areas. So start off with you, Councillor Bradnam.
Very much, Chair. Councillor Niche and I are both rapporteurs on the Transport and Infrastructure Committee, but Councillor Niche was actually on holiday at the time of the committee. So I managed to watch it on the live stream. I didn't attend in person, but so forgive me, I'm working from my notes because that's easier, but I'm proposing just to give a summary of what was considered, and if that's okay, that's the sort of thing that you want me to do. I've been a rapporteur before, but I will.
So normally it's sort of flagging up particular things that might be of concern to the committee, rather than sort of complete summaries of what was discussed. So if there are things that we might want to consider in the future.
Right. Okay. And I know I'm mindful that Judith Barker might also have contributed already, and others have mentioned some of these things, so I will keep it brief. So the main substantive items that were being looked at Transport and Infrastructure Committee on the 4th of November were fen roads, peat and soil affected roads, and the fact that we have an enormous job of work on our hands to try and repair and, in fact, broadly speaking, rebuild a lot of these roads because they are falling as our lorries have got heavier, the roads have suffered. So one of the things that came up was that new trials are being considered as to what materials we can use to rebuild these roads with, and small trial sections are being tried out with a combination of materials to try and find out what we can use to restructure these roads. Just one interesting point came out of it, is that one fully laden train of unknown number of carriages can take 129 lorries off the road. And one of the things that people recognised was that actually part of the problem is we've got a lot of very heavy lorries on our roads, and they're harming the infrastructure. And part of the reason we haven't got trains taking our freight around is because the connection from Felixstowe to Ipswich by train is not electrified, and so that is a very slow and single track line. So the last line always has to be done by lorries anyway, so they often start off on lorries too. I also note that years ago the post office, who always used to take mail by train, switched to roads. Having said that, the amount of mail has significantly dropped. Anyway, so that's one concern. The second thing was the Ely to Cambridge corridor study, which has previously been mentioned. They are in the process of trying to look at future options around capacity and safety. There's a gateway review, which is making sure that what we're proposing now towards the objectives that were set before still matches with what we were asked, still matches with what the objectives are now in future. So it's on track at the moment. The other point was that the most important thing with that review is that it should be safe. And one of the concerns is that there are a number of junctions on the A10 which have caused significant problems. The County Council are sharply aware of the Cardyke Road junction, which caused a death back in 2021. But the junction immediately south of that, which is between Landbeach and Milton, is also very dangerous and difficult, and the only reason it hasn't triggered the sufficient deaths is because by the time cars are on that section, they're in congestion going towards Cambridge, and so traffic movements are slow there. But certainly the mayor undertook to look at improving the safety of what's called the Humphreys Way junction. Currently, the trigger is the 300th occupation on the urban and civic site at Waterbeach Newtown. Lots of representations are being made to the Combined Authority to inject funding to bring that improvement in safety to an earlier point. There was also mention of the A141 St Ives improvement, and that's, as others have said, it's under consultation at the moment, and a suggestion that there might be a link to Huntingdon train station. We then looked at the GCP transport strategy, the Greater Cambridge transport strategy, and there was an early date from that, from Lynn Miles. There was also talk about the fact, much in the same way as we've talked today, about the fact that the Greater Cambridge area refers to the travel to work area for Cambridge. But of course, as others have said, and Councillor Smith pointed out, people come from a very long way away to work in Cambridge, and indeed the other way, people go to a very long way away. So we need coordination with those other adjoining authorities, but also with the Greater Cambridge local plan, because we've been asked to deliver more housing by the previous government under the Cambridge Delivery Group. And we need to make sure all these things mesh together and that we're providing sufficient infrastructure to support this new requirement for additional houses. Right. So there's a link up between, obviously.
Councillor Bradley, if there are any particular things that we might want to look at, I think that's the sort of the main focus, rather than.
Okay, so well, maybe that's one thing we ought to look up to make sure that the Combined Authority is actually linking up appropriately with the GCP and other surrounding local authorities.
Yep.
There was reference to Wisbech Rail. I won't go over that because other people have mentioned that. There was looking at the infrastructure delivery framework. Again, that's been mentioned before. Again, it needs to inform the local growth plan. And finally, there was reference to the bus reform consultation and the importance of that linking up and making not just bus networks, but also transport networks that link buses to railway stations.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any more rapporteur updates? so I'll do my little one on the housing governance review. Last working group on the for to review the housing programme was set up at the last committee. Since then, the internal audit has been doing some work on this topic. I understand they're in the final stages of the review, and we expect that to be completed in the coming days. Then the housing working group set up by the committee will meet as soon as possible after that. I think that's important so that the work that we do is informed by the internal audit, and so that we're able to determine a focused programme for that work in the following few weeks. Given timings, sort of future meetings, I am aiming sort of as firmly as I possibly can to bring a substantive report to the January meeting of overviewed scrutiny, which doesn't leave a lot of time to do the work, but I think if we as I said, are very focused using the conclusions of the audit, then we'll be able to achieve that. I know you could do whatever you find. No, oh dear. Well, okay. Need to have a word with the people in charge of that. Yep, good. We at the formal meeting we discussed the work programme. I think for the immediate, we've got a good programme. Yes, Councillor Khan. Oh, yes. Yes. I think we're dwindling numbers, but it sort of again focusing on. Okay. Well, you do turn your microphone on, Councillor Khan, yes.
Thank you. Duly corrected. But anybody wants one, I can. In the future, I can circulate it through. The issues are raised. There were a number of issues raised, but in view of time, I just thought some comments and thoughts.
Yes.
Anybody who wants to read what was this, yes, can look at the agenda. There was discussion of the Great Ouse Valley and the need for a national designation and the problems. I missed a little bit of that because I came in late, but they have a problem there that they can't find a suitable designation. I just thought personally, that the UNESCO Biosphere Reserve and the fact the proposal of one for the Fens, this might be an area which could be integrated. It might be an area which would be applicable, and we give it some sort of status. That was just my thought about it. There's a discussion about local nature recovery strategies, and the problem of delays. There's only 6 of them have been actually gone through now out of I can't remember how many it was. They're only out of about very many. In any case, we're late. We've got a draft strategy, but we haven't been able. We won't be able to get a final strategy through before the deadline because we're going to be getting into PERDA and then all the consultations have got to go with the bodies. But my comment was that these are essential. But if we spend all our time waiting for the strategy to come through, we're not going to be able to do much. In this field in particular, opportunist actions tend to be quite important. I remember that some opportunity comes up and you've got to be able to deal with it and respond. I think we need to think about how we respond to opportunistic opportunities that arise in terms of having resources and a way forward, so that that can happen. There's a continual mention of water, which of course is a big problem for the area, which we don't actually have a direct control of. But or my comment on that is simply that we should maintain internal vigilance. That's the way to keep at it. Climate action grants, there was a lot of discussion about it being a rather small amount, and this basically is a pilot program. So that I think it's important. It was clearly important that you have a good publicity. You try to make sure that the ones that we've got in the pilot program are successfully delivered. If we're going to argue for more resources, that was clear. And I've already talked about the problems with the energy hub and the Southeast Energy Hub and Net Zero Hub, and how we deliver with the problems with that grant program.
Okay. Oh, thank you very much indeed. Thanks for that. Yes, so just work program, got a work program. Not that we can terminate now, but we've got a informal meeting for that. Yes, we've got an informal meeting mid-December, and then the next formal meeting is in January. Thank you very much. Thank you.